This novel was requested by Hiroshiro Neko of More Clan. History of an Ace Pilot CH 266-288 CH 266 Old vs New for Heavenly One TSK. Nora clicked her tongue when she saw the Geist Vector rushing toward her. The power behind its acceleration was tremendous. It appears that Dairos did not exaggerate when she said that its specs are even higher than that of an Imperial family striker. The fact that it might be faster than her, Zareva, also ticked her off. Geist Vector's shoulder claws rapid-fire low-power particle bullets at her, and Nora counterattack with her blaster Magnum while tight-turning to avoid the barrage. Evade. The voice that came through the Connectcom channel was so emotionless as though it belonged to an AI. It was creepy. The pilot, who named herself Zwei, fired up the rocket engine attached to the tip of her gigantic sword and took complicated evasive maneuvers to avoid the shots from Nora's magnums. One can call the movement acrobatic, but it is still so unsettling to look at. Eliminate. While she was thinking to herself, there, Geist Vector approached her in a blink of an eye. The figure coming at her with a huge guillotine blade looks much closer to a monster rather than a striker. Chill ran down Nora's spine. Ugh! She kicked the slope and managed to get away from the ridiculously thick blade. The jet flame emitted from the rocket engine on its edge slightly scorched the surface of the Zareva. It was what you call a close call. However, she isn't out of the woods yet. Aside from its gigantic guillotine blade, the enemy is also equipped with 2 auxiliary claws. But faster than the muscles on their tips can flash, Nora thrust out the bayonet attached to her magnum. Defend. The bayonet that was supposed to jam the muzzle of the rapid-fire blaster cannon was flicked away by 3 sharp claws. They look more fragile than the main claws, but they still have enough power to parry away Zareva's full power blow. Move, Nora-chan. Hearing Eleanor's shout, Nora obeyed her instruction on a conditioned reflex. She fired her thruster at full power, and there, Geist Vector tried to give chase, but Helena mercilessly shot her twin Mega Blaster rifle. The twin beams hit the icy slope, causing dry ice to evaporate in an instant, creating a white smoke screen. Amidst the smoke screen, 3 pink spots of light glistened. It was the Geist Vector. It got away. Eleanor voiced her bitterness, but she couldn't afford to fire a follow-up shot. A warning started to sound in the cockpit. She immediately took an evasive maneuver, and a moment later, an extra thick beam passed right next to where she was. The scattered particles from the shot even managed to make the magenta paint on her profile bubble from the intense heat alone. Critical condenser capacity, the AI notified. Although she did not suffer any fatal damage, the machine status displayed on her monitor is showing spots of yellow. Just the grays did that to her armor, so it would not be a stretch to think that even the extra thick armor of her profile would be charred with a direct hit. Tursis-sama, please keep the gunner one in check. There, Geist Vector is already tough enough as their opponent, so it would be too much for Nora and Eleanor to look out for a gunner with equivalent firepower to a battle cruiser's turret. Judging so, Eleanor shouted at Tursis, I'm already doing it ... but this is tough. Of course, Tursis wasn't spacing out either. She had left Zwei to Nora and Eleanor and had been facing their Geist artillery alone. It should be easy enough for her to keep it in check at close range with it carrying such heavy equipment. Or it was supposed to be. This striker, though, was unusual. The heavy blaster cannon it's carrying also has a large built-in thruster. Ain is using that like a witch on a broom to keep a distance from Tursis while occasionally providing support to Zwei. Reload. A huge particle cartridge was ejected and a new cartridge was automatically fed into the chamber by a revolver-shaped magazine. Naturally, Tursis did not miss such an opportunity and rushed in to slash at it. However, her strike was blocked by its metallic auxiliary claws. Counterattack. Mew. In addition, Tursis had to protect herself from the rapid-fire blaster cannon with her shield. In the meantime, Ain pushed a button on her control stick. Jet flame spits out from the tip of her heavy blaster cannon, and its stupidly large muzzle is quickly pointing at the Van Wolf. Mew Mew, even with her shield which boasts the highest level of defense, would have a tough time blocking a shot from such a thing. Tursis panicked a little before blowing her thrusters to escape the path of the muzzle. A moment after, A torrent of high-power particles was released from the muzzle. The flash of light was so intense that it automatically activated the anti-glare function on the monitor, and there, Van Wolf's vision went dark for a moment. "This guy, she's good." Tursis let out a joyful smile. Despite the crisis she's in, she's actually happy about her situation. Naturally, Nora and Eleanor do not share that enthusiasm. "Quickly send us some reinforcement, Desu. This is going terribly, Desu. Our hands are full on this side too. Do something about those two yourselves." Although she called for help, Dirose's reply was merciless. Hearing that, Nora instinctively puffed up her cheeks, wondering why she can't just send Kaisai over. CH 267. Old vs New for Heavenly 2. Seriously? That sure gave us a scare. Eleanor muttered in relief, seeing Tursis manage to avoid the beam. She's currently facing their Geistfetcher, which continues to fire at her with its rapid-fire low-power blaster cannon. She's doing her best to find an opening to attack, and she cannot afford to support Tursis right now. Her face is drenched in sweat and some drip to her eyes, yet her gaze is still fixed on her enemy despite the pain. And sure enough, their Geistfechter rushed her with its guillotine blade. Even a veteran like Eleanor gets chills seeing such a thing flying at her with such tremendous speed. "Not so fast, Desu." Nora fires her blaster magnum in the path of the Geistfechter. Of course, Eleanor herself also fired her twin Mega Blaster rifle and twin Gatling gun at the same time, and their Geistfechter is now subjected to a crossfire. However, if it's an opponent that can be taken down with this much effort, then they wouldn't have a hard time in the first place. As they expected, their Geistfechter fired a thruster at the tip of its blade and performed a bizarre evasive maneuver. A storm of 40mm bullets and beams vainly cut through the place it was, and not a moment later, their Geistfechter returned fire at their Zareva with its rapid-fire blaster cannon. Despite the unreasonable movement it's doing, its shot was extremely accurate. There's no time for Nora to evade, but she manages to guard the body by relying on the thick armor plate on their Zareva's arm. On impact, the particle bullets burst and disappeared. "Stop with that gross movement already," Eleanor shouted while throwing away her twin Mega Blaster rifle. The thing is certainly an extremely powerful weapon, but it takes too much time to load it. With her first shot already spent, she has no time to reload. Instead, she held up her twin Gatling gun with both hands and continued raining bullets down on their Geistfechter, which still continued to rush at her. The Gatling gun, which boasts a high fire rate, kept fiercely spewing shells at their Geistfechter, but Zwei was unfazed by that. Consecutive evasive maneuvers, with lightning-fast movement, Zwei crisply avoided the hail of shells, and a few seconds later, their Parfil was already within the range of her guillotine blade. The rocket engine roared and the gigantic blade rapidly approached Eleanor. "Damn you!" Escaping back, she somehow managed to avoid the blade. She immediately ignited her thruster and hurriedly took a distance. "Pursuit." "No you won't." At the same moment, Eleanor's twin Gatling gun and Zwei's rapid-fire blaster cannon fired at the same time. The shells and beams pass each other, damaging both of their strikers. Both strikers are daily heavy armored, so despite being hit, they do not stop firing. Intervening. However, Ein's Geistartillery shook Tursis off again and fired another shot at Eleanor. If she wasn't an ace, she wouldn't have been able to react in time, and she along with her striker would get evaporated by the beam. Ein's shot was as quick and accurate as it is powerful. Still, Eleanor is still a former 4 Heavenly. She kicked off the ground at the last second and managed to escape from the blast. A humongous beam smashed into the iceberg, engulfing the surrounding area, and causing a catastrophic collapse. Her ally was that close and she still fired that thing at me. What's up with her? Albeit indignant, Eleanor still looks around with some expectations. At this moment, she would gladly take the outcome where her enemy got taken out by friendly fire here. However, it was not that easy. Through the smoke, their Geistfechter came rushing at her like a cannonball. There are a number of bullet holes on the surface of its black and white armor, but it doesn't seem like the damage it took affected its movement at all. "You're as troublesome as a certain man I know, Soon." From the side, there, Zareva rushed in. Zwei is focusing her attack on Elena, and Nora wouldn't just sit still and watch her friend get killed. She understands full well that she and Tursis alone cannot take down these two monsters by themselves. Intercepting, Zwei received the kick from there, Zareva, with her guillotine blade. The blade, which boasts a massive size that no ordinary striker can carry, did not even budge at all from there. Zareva's full power kick. Moreover, at the moment she blocked the attack, the auxiliary claws also started counterattacking. The steel claws rigidly growl as they inch closer to the Zareva, muttering each and every move to yourself. To use some kind of CPU? Nora catches the claws with her magnum's bayonets. The two iron claws and the bayonets clashed, sending sparks flying. Zareva's feet dug into the iceberg. Despite their fragile appearance, the auxiliary claws can even overpower their Zareva, which had been thoroughly tuned to heighten its power output. Not only that, their Geistfetcher's main arms are free. Jet flames spewed from its skeleton blade as it was gradually being pushed toward the Zareva. Damn it! Nora pushed the claws back and took as much distance as she could. At the same time, she also flicked a switch and fired the grenade launcher installed on their Zareva's chest. The short barrel immediately ejected a tactical grenade which directly hit the black and white monster. A moment later, Eleanor also showers it with shells from her Gatling gun. The grenade exploded and their Geistfechter was wrapped in flame. Meanwhile, the 40mm bullets from the Gatling gun kept raining on their Geistfechter. Still, that did not stop it. Its trinocular camera glinted a mysterious light amidst the explosion. Damn monster! With a chill running down her spine, Nora growls at the monster in front of her. CH-268 Graverubber.con 8-10 minutes. Fall of the mobile fortress. While Tursis's group was locked in a fierce battle against the clones, the people at the mobile fortress, Valiza, which was the strategic key to containing the Empress's fleet, were spending their time in boredom. While gazing at the canyon on her main monitor, Lauren silently strokes the trigger on her control stick. So far, there's still no sign that the enemy fleet will leave their cover. The attack from their heavy artillery and explosives had already stopped a while ago. After all, they cannot afford to waste all their ammunition just to keep the enemy in check. At the moment, although she can hear strikers fighting in a distance, the battlefield as a whole feels stagnated. Lauren-san, what do you think the enemy is doing? A striker pilot at the feet of the Valiza asked in a bored tone. Even though they are on a battlefield, the fact that there hasn't been even a single shell landing anywhere nearby can't help but make them relax their guard. No movement. Same as before. When their Adelcroix, which is the enemy flagship, ascended, she was delighted at the chance to take the Empress's head herself, but unfortunately, the Empress soon descended back down the canyon and she didn't have the chance to fire. Since then, strikers and such crafts started appearing, but big targets like battleships and other vessels are holding up in the depths of the canyon without making even a single move. However, she knows that they won't stay in that hole forever, so she must remain vigilant of any sign of movement. Thinking so, Lauren glanced at the clock while carefully keeping the canyon in her line of sight. Curse you! You are! She took my left arm. From the radio, she could hear the screams of her comrades. From the mountain where their Valiza is stationed, it's impossible for her to see the place where Tursis and the others are fighting. Still, their tone of voice clearly suggested that they are struggling. Can't I support them? Lauren thought for a moment. Lauren doesn't think of them as her friends, but she still has some sense of companionship with them. She also thinks that if she gets on their good side, she might be able to use it to her advantage later. No, I can't. But she couldn't come up with a way to support them from her station. If their Valia is in good shape, then she might be able to do it, but regrettably, it was returned to service after only some minimal repairs. In short, right now the fortress itself is full of defects. What Lauren finds particularly irritating about its state is its inaccuracy. The sensor aside, the barrel of its main cannon was badly damaged and she can't place her shot well even if her aim is true. If this thing is in decent condition, then she could have the others lure the Soil Ant sisters into a kill zone and take them out immediately. After all, Their Valiza's firepower far eclipses what their Geist artillery has. At its present condition though, let alone her enemy, she can't even be sure if her shot will land on her allies. Lyran let out a small sigh. All she can do now is keep her eyes fixed on the enemy. The situation is so frustrating that her finger just moves in a motion of trigger pulling on its own. Since then, more than a dozen minutes have passed. The screams from the radio are still going strong. It appears that no one has been shot down so far, but she can assume that the strikers of the other four heavenly aside from her have suffered significant damage. It was when Lyran thought that this might be bad. Enemy strikers incoming, south-southwest. A Claymore, which was deployed to keep a lookout, reported in a desperate voice. Lyran hurriedly turned her gaze toward the direction and spotted a group of Renians sewing through the gaps between the iceberg. Their jet-black armor shone brilliantly, reflecting the dim light of Gaily Star. They're already pretty close. Tsk. A detachment on top of their active stealth device. They've used the terrain to their advantage so that their presence won't be detected by their radar. They wouldn't have been able to get this close without Lyran noticing otherwise. While cursing the sloppiness of her allies' detection network, Lyran aimed the quadruple rapid-fire blaster cannons on both hands of the Valiza at the enemy group. When she pulled the trigger, countless red particle bullets rained down on the core of Renians. However, they agilely spread out and none of them got hit. This is bad. Lyran's face cramped up. She didn't even point the muzzles at them beforehand, but they still managed to perfectly evade her shots. She's still unfamiliar with the equipment, but her enemies are certainly skilled. In any case, she's failed to intercept the enemy. Their Renians continue heading toward them. Of course, Lyran keeps raining beams on them, but the Imperial Guards will not falter just because of that. Don't let them get any closer. Their Claymores and Jetters, deployed around their Valiza, began to fight back, but despite the beams and shells they threw at their Renians, their enemies avoided them all with minimal movements. We're abandoning the Valiza. In the end, Lyran gave up trying to intercept the enemy. Right now the Valiza does not have any anti-aircraft weapon. Once the enemy gets close, she will have no way to deal with them. Tearing off a number of cables connecting her striker to the mobile fortress, Lyran jumped off the temporary control center of the Valiza. Seeing the violet striker leapt away, the Imperial Guards shouted behind her. That's Lyran slain. She may be one of the former four heavenly, but her striker wasn't designed for close-range combat. Keep pushing. There. Renians, accelerate toward the Valiza. On the other hand, Lyran pulled out a large sniper rifle from the back of her Priceta, and fired it immediately. A high-powered beam cut through the atmosphere and destroyed a reunion. However, she could only take down one artillery corps. Commence fire. Following the captain's command, a large number of mobile artillery units that had been secretly deployed in the distance immediately discharged 21 cm zap rounds. Naturally, their target was the Valiza. Many of them were deflected away by the shield, but their Renians didn't wait around and fire their anti-ship grenade launchers at it from a close distance. The shield generator was overloaded by the heavy bombardment and exploded. Most of the anti-ship missiles pierced the armor of the walking fortress and the steel giant was engulfed in flames. There, Valiza is, a Kalanchian soldier screamed. The giant fortress collapsed on its back with a loud jarring sound. There, Valiza was only given a minimal repair, so it was not durable enough to withstand such an attack. Its steel armor peeled off and hydraulic oil spewed out from the gaps as though it was bleeding fresh blood. Eventually, there, Valiza helplessly rolled down the slope of the mountain and fell to the abyss. Notify the fleet. Mission success. The Imperial Guards quickly retreated, with the Valiza out of the way. There's no need for them to be here anymore. The Kalanchians fired at their back, but they easily evaded, so their shots had little effect. Should we chase after them? Asked a former Noredian soldier who now belongs to Valentina's faction. She just lost a strategic weapon to the enemy without being able to even put up a proper resistance. There's nothing more humiliating than this. If possible, she wanted to give chase and release her anger, but no need. Lyran gave a reply. She grins as she looks down at the clock. After all, our mission is already successful. CH-269 Disaster. When the report of the fall of the Valizer came in, what hit the Empress first was not joy but relief. It fell. Finally, exhaling a sigh of relief, the Empress rubs her eyebrows. In reality, the Empress's fleet did not stay inside the canyon for that long, but as she was on the pressured side, a day felt like 1,000. With the Valizer removed, all we have to do is leave this hole. But the Empress growled as she directed her eyes at the situation outside that was being displayed on the main monitor. The enemy is no longer laying down suppressive fire, but it's obvious that the Kalanchans would concentrate fire on their Adelcroix if she ascends. What came to her mind was when she ordered the ascension earlier. Despite having the thickest armor of all the battleships in Nord, Adelcroix still suffered considerable damage. Even if their Valizer is no longer a threat, the enemy's firepower cannot be taken lightly. Can you ready there, Lagram? Ha! The unexpected request caused the Chamberlain to be confused for a moment. Lagram is the Empress's personal striker. Naturally, same as any other Vald commander's personal machine, it is always on standby and ready to be sortie at any time. Still, the Empress was never the type to head to the front line herself. In the first place, there's no need for her to head out at this time. However, the Chamberlain understood well how foolish it is to question the Empress's order. She's the type that would execute her subordinate for the most trivial reason. Rather than saying anything, the safest way would be to obey her order. Certainly, you can sortie immediately, Your Majesty. Very well, I'm going out. You will follow me with the Adelcroix and break through the enemy line. I will take the lead. Saying so, the Empress stood up with a conceited smile. In truth, the Empress's aim was extremely simple. The Kalanchans would definitely pour everything they have on their Adelcroix, so if that's the case, she would be safer on board a smaller craft. That may sound cowardly, but she thinks that risking one's life for honor and appearance is stupid. It's unlikely that the Adelcroix will fall, but using it as a decoy is still the most reasonable plan for her. With that being the case, the Empress headed toward the storage deck and catapulted off with her Lagram. The mechanics and crews were saluting her as she left, but she didn't spare them a glance. Now then, let's see what the Kalanchan dogs have in store, the Empress muttered while confirming that the Imperial Guards are gathering around her. Naturally, among her guards are 2 of the black and white strikers. They were the remaining 2 of the new 4 Heavenly. Even so, this is such an overkill. I will have to repay this humiliation 100 times over. Even if she loses there, Adelcroix, the remaining force of the Noridian army is still plenty enough to crush the enemy despite the damage they have suffered. The Empress was seeing off the ascending Adelcroix while thinking something along that line, but the next moment a gigantic explosion suddenly occurred on both sides of the canyon. A flash of light as intense as the sun wraps around the fleet, and the violent blast and shockwaves shook their Lagram. Gah! The Empress screamed. A number of warning messages popped up on the sub-monitor, reporting the damage her striker has suffered. The Empress managed to remain conscious by shaking her head. The impact from the shockwave was so strong that without the high specs of her striker and Vuldanate physical endurance she would have fainted. However, the Empress could not afford to analyze her situation right now. After all, a number of huge ice blocks more than a kilometer in size are raining on them from above. At the edge of her vision, she could see a number of her ships getting hit directly by such debris and falling to the abyss. Arg! With her face instantly pale, the Empress managed to avoid an ice block. However, there were still many left. The canyon itself is heading toward a full-scale collapse. At this rate, she won't be able to escape. Thinking so, the Empress hurriedly activated her thrusters and soared with her guards in tow. She never expected that such a disaster would occur even before they left the cover of the canyon. Fortunately, however, no shells rained down on her when she left the canyon. As she rushes away from the collapse, the Empress wipes the cold sweat off her face. What just happened? She could still hear the sound of explosions from the canyon. From the sound, she she judged that she was already far enough away. It appears that the enemy has detonated a large number of explosives in the canyon. Most of her fleet is probably buried alive by this time. The armor of her battleships is extremely sturdy, so such collapse won't cause fatal damage, but if they are crushed under such a volume of ice, then it will be difficult for them to escape. The Kalanshans must have planted those explosives, and this was their plan from the start. See, curse you. The Empress's shoulders are trembling in anger, but her suffering has not come to an end yet. Suddenly, the AI voiced another warning. High mass approaching. High mass approaching. At that time, the light of Gailey's star that's floating in the middle of the sky was blocked by something. It was as though night suddenly arrived and her surroundings turned pitch black. When the Empress looked up to the sky in a hurry, a potato-like massive rock was in the sky. Its exterior was dyed red by adiabatic compression. Gailey 1. That was the name of the rock mass, aka a satellite that's being displayed on the monitor. It's the only satellite orbiting Gailey E, and it is now approaching the surface with tremendous momentum. The Empress's face, which was already deep blue, has turned white as a sheet. Th. That girl. SHE's dropping a whole satellite on top of her OWN mother's head. CH-270. After the disaster, despite the fact that Gailey is a planet with relatively low gravity, it would still be a disaster if a satellite several kilometers wide falls directly on it. Kaisai and the others have already evacuated a considerable distance away, but the shockwave from the impact still shook the ground, and they could clearly see the enormous dust cloud in a distance. WH. What? The sound of impact heard through the thin atmosphere was as scary as the end of the world. The icebergs evaporated and the atmosphere itself was raging like a natural disaster. If that's what he can feel from out here, then he doesn't even want to imagine what's going on at the center of the impact. This is a part of your plan? Kaisai did not hear about this at all. He was terribly confused when he heard the urgent withdrawal order, but he can't really complain if what comes after was an asteroid. It's actually a satellite, dropping on their head. When I was asked to overcome our difference in number, this is the only way I could think of. Diarose replied with a guilty look. Her tone was vague, but there's no helping it. The blast from the impact alone would be enough to render the enemy fleet immobile for the time being. Moreover, with an actual satellite dropped directly on their head, some might even evaporate without leaving a body behind from the blast alone. This is the reason she forcefully took control of Excalibur. Knowing how death can affect Kaisai while he's connected to Icon, she expected that it would negatively affect his mind. At worst, the shock from it alone might even cripple him. I see. Kaisai held his head. To be honest, he also has his opinion about this. From his personal aesthetic sense, wiping the enemy out using a weapon of mass destruction without even facing the enemy face to face is not something he agrees with. However, if he was asked what he can propose they do instead, he would not be able to say anything. No matter how hard he fights, the enemy outnumbered them so much that he understood he won't be able to turn the tide alone. He knows that prioritizing his aesthetic over victory is wrong. That's why he can't say something like, "How could you do this?" Even so, an awkward atmosphere lingers in the cockpit. After all, it is what it is. The planet's atmosphere continues to rage on, telling how devastating the impact was. The reason why the sky is dim right now is probably due to the dust that got rolled up from the initial impact. It seems we won't be able to send a recon unit yet, huh? At least, I don't think they're all wiped out though. After a while, Kaisai speaks. His eyes are on the radar screen of the sub-monitor. Unsurprisingly, the radar was filled with noises due to severe radio interference. They will have to rely on visual confirmation alone to detect the enemy. In a situation like this, It would be too dangerous for strikers or ships to be sent to the center of the impact. There should be some time for them to run between when they detected Gaily E1 falling and the impact. Their units that were still mobile should be able to get out in time if they ran with all their might, but the problem is whether the Empress is among them. Dia-Rose tried to answer with her voice as normal as possible while suppressing the shaking. It was the plan she concocted, but it was not like she has no regret about it. Schleer, what do you think? Placing her hand on the shoulder of the Miss Tiltwine, that's right next to them, Dia-Rose asked. They were now hiding in a semi-open shelter made of reinforced concrete. When they first planned this, they prepared such shelters for evacuation purposes on Gaily E. Other ally strikers and ships are also hiding in similar shelters dotting the surface. To be honest, we have too little information right now. In a time like this, we should assume the worst. The Empress is still alive and the enemy fleet should still be operable to some extent. Let's operate under that premise, Schleer says while choosing her words carefully. The damage from the impact was lesser than she had initially expected, so it's not impossible for the Empress to survive. They cannot afford to be careless and leave themselves open for a counterattack. Since this is the final phase of their operation, this is the time when they need to be the most on guard. Right. Anyway, let's gather some information first. It would be a grave mistake for us if we let the Empress escape from this place. We must decide the match here. Yes, let's sortie our recon units immediately once the storm settles down. The laser cam would be jumbled with all this dust flying around, but we need to rebuild our recon network and grasp the enemy's position as soon as possible. I will leave that to you. Saying so, Dia-Rose turned her head to the sky and shut her eyes. Ha, I want to relax, but I don't think I can afford to do that yet. CH-271. The routed Empress. A few hours later, the Empress was flying through the gaps in the ridge of the icebergs with a paled face. Her striker, Lagram, is covered in scratches and only a few of her guards are left accompanying her. There may be others who survived, but they are the only ones who managed to join up with the Empress. Their state was so terrible that no one would think that they are the Empress's personal guard. The moment she saw the satellite falling, the Empress immediately decided to run. As a result, she's now separated from her subordinates and it's a situation where she doesn't even know if they are still alive or not. Gee, Nunu. The Empress groaned. With only the subordinates she has with her right now, she can't possibly engage the Kalanchans. If possible, she wants to leave this rock immediately and return to her country. Naturally, she also wants to take revenge against Dia-Rose and the Kalanchan army, but she was not stupid enough to stay around and entertain such a delusion. The Kalanchans do not possess enough strength to chase her back to her homeland, and the smart thing for her to do right now is to recoup her strength in safety and launch another invasion. However, she can't even afford to do that right now. If she flies high, the enemy will be able to detect her easily. It's shameful to admit, but it would be very difficult for her to escape this planet with only the guards she has now. Aren't there any ally units nearby? In a harsh tone, the Empress asked her ally, a small class cruiser, their orbit, that's flying ahead of her. It was constructed as a recon ship with superb detection capability incomparable to that of her and her subordinates' strikers. It is also capable of wide-range communication, so it is an assuring ally to have in a situation like this. It's no good, Your Majesty. The dust cloud is obstructing our visions and the radio interference still hasn't let up yet. The reply was filled with noises and was terribly difficult to make sense of. Dry ice particles are scattering in the atmosphere and they are interfering heavily with their laser communication. Hearing the reply, the Empress clicked her tongue. She then turned toward her guards. Since the sky was covered with dust clouds, their surroundings were almost pitch black. Without their night vision, even strikers would have a hard time seeing ahead of them. Only 20-ish. The Empress sighed at the small number of escorts she has. Even though they are elites, they can do little with this number. The ones she can count on are probably only the new 4 Heavenly. Fortunately, she managed to join up with the Heavenly Blade and Heavenly Thunder since they issued an early withdrawal order before the impact. Right now, These 4 clone soldiers are the Empress's only trump card. For the time being we need to join up with our allies first but ... This is annoying. If she can't muster up a sizable force, she won't be able to escape this planet. However, she definitely wants to avoid splitting her already small group to look for her surviving allies. It's a terrible dilemma. Vessel detected to the northwest. Suddenly, one of the guards shouted in a tense voice. A chill ran down the Empress's spine. Is it enemy or ally? That's the question. If it's an enemy, they will have to handle it somehow with what little force she is with her right now. With their radio filled with noises, their IFF system is down as they cannot take a look at their identification code. Moreover, the dust cloud has rendered their optical equipment pretty much useless. In such a situation, there's no choice but to approach and check them up close. Judging so, she had the Imperial Guard who first detected the vessel approach it with a wingman. 4 Prussia-class ships. They are our allies, Your Majesty. The Empress stroked her chest in relief at the Imperial Guard's joyful report. Prussia class is a class of battleships that boast its sailing speed. It's the same class of battleships that's under Valentina's command, but Valentina only commands 2 of such ships. If they are flying in a formation of 4, then it is highly likely that they are her allies. However, her relief was soon drowned by the sudden sound of an explosion. After a moment of delay, a strong shockwave followed. Obviously, it was the sound of a turret being fired and an impact. Since both were heard at about the same time, it is safe to assume that the shooter is in their immediate vicinity. What happened? Who fired? There, Prussia. Ships are pointing their turrets at us. It's them, Your Majesty. Another shot was heard and almost at the same time the communication was cut off. The Imperial Guard was shot down. With that realization, the Empress hurriedly connected a comm line with the ship that opened fire. Do you know who you're firing at? If you don't cease this right now, I'm going to take it as treason. Fools. Normally, she would have put the offender to a guillotine blade immediately, but with her allies being so few in number, she cannot afford to do that. While praying inwardly that it was simply a mistake, the Empress patiently asked, HMPH. I guess a fool's mother is also a fool, huh? Isn't it clear enough that I already know who I'm shooting at? However, the reply was simply merciless. The Empress could taste the mockery that was carried in her attacker's voice. You bastard has already run out of luck. The Empress's head should serve well as a gift for my new master. So just sit still and die, will you? T. Her ally has turned coat. The Empress's vision turned pitch black for a second. CH-272. Pursuit commences. Even in an environment where enemy detection via radio waves and visuals is difficult, a battleship in the middle of combat is still very much noticeable. The Kalanchen Recon Striker, there, Twilight Eye, detected the muzzle flash and immediately reported the sighting to the main recon unit. Naturally, as the Kalanchen army is in the middle of a search and destroys mission, such a thing cannot be overlooked. A pursuit unit was formed with highly mobile vessels and quickly sorted to the reported location. This is ... It's an infighting, isn't it? Schleer shouted in the cockpit of Miss Tiltwine, which is currently flying through a raging storm. Her sub-monitor is displaying the image of the enemy ship taken by their recon vessel. Although the storm, dust, and general darkness make their visibility very poor, they can read that Prussia-class ships are engaging with a group of Renians. My Prussia is waiting in the rear after all. There's no way that my ships are in a place like this, so it's probably safe to say that it's infighting. Valentina replied while stroking her control stick. The environment was much tougher than this right after the satellite fell, but the current storm is still fully capable of blowing away their strikers if they are not careful. It's bitter to admit, but I have to say that Dirose's plan worked out very well. Honestly, regardless of their chances, I never thought that they would betray the Empress so readily. It's all according to the plan. Even so, there are still 3 questions left. Is the Empress still alive? Which side is the one loyal to the Empress? And whether this is truly infighting or not? Dirose, who had already yielded the control back to Kaisai, said while leaning sloppily back in her seat. It seems that she was tired from her long battle. The first two we will find out once we arrive at the scene, but the last one would be tough to discern. It's also possible that they're faking it to lure us in. It won't be funny if they pretend to side with us and shoot us from behind after all. This is Dairo's mother we are talking about after all. I wonder what she's up to here. Dairo puffed up her cheeks at their serious remarks. She finds it hard to refute since it's the truth, but even though it's a fact, she still doesn't like it. Anyway, it's best that we be careful. With a wry smile, Kaisai said that while waving his hand dismissively. Dropping a satellite on top of a fleet is a very unconventional tactic, so both their enemies and allies are in confusion. In such a situation, going about this by the book would be unwise, so they ought to be more flexible. Right, let's be on our guard as we judge the situation. With the visibility so poor, the battleships should not be able to exert their full potential. Our destroyers should be able to take them. Whether we choose to advance or retreat, our vanguards are still the key players here. This is getting exciting, isn't it? Ashleigh said. The visibility is too poor for large ships to move around carelessly. That's why their vanguard unit consists of a squadron of strikers centered around a destroyer. Their main force will come in once they ascertain the situation. That's right. But Dairo seems to agree with their plan, but her face clouded over when she gazed at the sub-monitor. The status of their ally vessels is being displayed via the data link system. Are Tursis and the others doing okay? If possible, I want them to hang back in the rear for the time being though. Yes, she's worried about the three who engaged the new four Heavenly. Of course, none of them was shot down, but their strikers were severely damaged. Some of them even got their arms and head blown off completely. Usually, you would hull such a machine back to the rear and assess whether they should repair it or scrap the whole thing. For Dairo's, she firmly believes that they shouldn't be on the front line like this. No, we also damage their strikers. As a knight, I cannot withdraw yet. In the first place, it was them who withdrew first. Desayo? If we leave the last blow to others, then we won't get the credit for taking them down. Desu? Yes, exactly. My pride as an aristocrat is in question. I won't back down until I shoot them down with my own hands. That's their argument. It's nice that they're enthusiastic about this, but it's still dangerous. The three had been cornered to the point that it wouldn't be exaggerating to say that their lives were in danger. However, from their perspective, they cannot let the clone soldiers mess with them like that and get away with it. We plan to have fun together after the war, so don't push yourselves, okay? We won't get to do that if you die after all. You. Seeing Dairo's worrying about us felt kinda new. Desu. Originally, Dairo's was famous as a ruthless commander. Nora may snort at the fact that she has become mellowed, but she has a point. Shut up. Seriously. With a sigh, Dairo's brings up a tactical map. They are just a bit away from the location where the enemy was sighted. It wouldn't be strange if they encounter some soon. Thinking so, Dairo's gazes at the back of Kaisai's head with worry. CH-273. All-out assault. As anticipated by Dairo's, it wasn't long after that they encountered the enemy. The location was a relatively flat basin, and they found the Noredians locked in a fierce gunfight. Crimson beams peculiar to Noredian weapons cut through the darkness and pierce into strikers and small ships, causing explosions on both sides. They really are going at each other, huh? Kaisai muttered with a frown. The burning sensation in his brain was proof that there were more than a few casualties already. Even though they should have lost many people in the satellite drop, he has to wonder why they are fighting among themselves in a situation like this. He's already angry as he is. Many of their troops should still be buried alive under the canyon, but instead of conducting a rescue, they are doing this. Kaisai was quietly burning with fighting spirit. Are they pretending? No. They've already crossed the line for that. It's true that the Empress is cold-blooded, but she wouldn't waste her soldiers like this. The loss would be too much. They can't see what exactly is going on from the outside, but judging by the number of gunshots, it seems that quite a few Noredian soldiers are fighting in the basin. Naturally, all this information came through their recon vessel. So far, They have not confirmed the presence of other enemy forces at other locations. Most of the Norwegian forces should be either buried alive underground or vaporized entirely by the impact, so it would probably be safe to say that all of their surviving forces are gathering here. What do we do? Should we launch an attack? From the Kalanchans' point of view, this is a big chance. There are certainly a lot of enemies gathered here, but if they perform a flanking attack, then they should be able to wipe them out relatively easily. If they can destroy what the enemy has left here, then the battle is as good as won. Right. How are our tanks doing? I want to make our first attack as intense as possible. Coordinating an attack with our fleet would be difficult in this kind of environment, but our tanks should be just fine. Due to the storm and dust, long-range battery fire would be extremely inaccurate. They can't afford to put their fleet in this kind of environment. With that being the case, the tanks which are specialized in close-range combat would be perfect to provide support for their strikers. I thought that we might need them, so I already have them on standby. We can't start at any time. Very well. How do I say this? It's kinda difficult to say which one is the general here. Soon. Hearing Schleer and Diarose's exchange, Nora snorted. Certainly, although Schleer is the commander here, Diarose was the one who's making the decision. She's the right person for the job. And since she's a property of Kaisai, I don't see a problem utilizing her to the fullest. Besides, the final decision is still mine to make. Nora doubted that, but she didn't say anything more. Rather than taking Schleer's order, she's more inclined to follow Diarose's direction. Well, don't worry about it. Right now we have to crush the enemy. But do we know if those guys are among them? That would be the most important detail, right? Diarose frowned as she got interrupted mid-sentence. Since this is a great opportunity to attack, she wants to crush the enemy immediately. With a loud sigh, she leaned forward and hugged Kaisai from behind while rubbing her nape on his neck. It would be bad if she does this while he's piloting, but since they are taking cover behind a rock, there's no problem. Come on. With a bitter smile, Kaisai pats her head. It felt like he was stroking a large dog. Her wavy fluffy blonde hair is very soft to the touch. By those guys, you mean the new Four Heavenly, right? Yes, exactly, Eleanor affirmed while pushing her uselessly big chest up. She was humiliated by the new Four Heavenly. If she doesn't get a rematch, then she just can't feel right again. The radar is useless and the visibility is so bad. There's no way we can tell who's who, right? Saki said in an exasperated voice. The fact is that even though they are right outside the battlefield, the enemy still failed to detect them. Only the bright flashes of the beams and explosions can clearly be seen at their distance. What? It's simple. We just thrust ourselves in there and find out. If their zeniths are in there, then we will come. Strong people gravitate to one another after all. Your reasoning is messed up. But you do have a point. It's true that they won't get anywhere if they keep staying here. It was rare, but Diarose does agree with Tursis this time. Still, Tursis's real intention was whatever, just let me attack them already. If the tanks are in position, then there's no need to hesitate anymore. Firstly, we vanguards will head in and take cover here. Once we establish visual contact, we should be able to have our tanks perform bombardment. Let's go with that then. As I thought, Diarose still looks like the commander here, added Nora in a small voice. Well then, advance. Schleer quietly nodded to the grinning Diarose. Even if she doesn't look like the commander, she's still the one giving orders here. Unsheathing her Zui hand out from the shoulder-mounted shield, Schleer commanded as she pointed the tip of her sword to the basin. This battle will put an end to our long conflict with the Nord Empire. All units, charge. CH-274, Great Melee 1. Kaisai's group flies right straight toward the basin that has turned into a battlefield. The Norwegians were so preoccupied with infighting that they didn't notice their approach. We hit their strikers first, commenced the attack. Pointing her sword at their Renians, who were taking cover behind a rock, Schleer shouted her command. At the same time, there, Mistiltwine's shoulder-mounted blaster cannon roared. A high-powered beam pierces through the rock surface, causing a small explosion. Newcomer, that beam color, it's the Kalanchans. What troublesome timing. A storm of beams and shells followed Schleer's opening shot, and their Renians rushed out from their cover in a hurry. Suddenly, a number of shells impacted the rock and exploded. dyeing the icy surface bright red. New ship's turrets. Seeing that, Schleer groaned. There, Renians, which were the target of the bombardment, panicked and scattered in all directions. Since they do not have the composure to take evasive actions now, they managed to shoot them down surprisingly easily. That explosion must have at least been caused by a 30 centimeters turret or above. Our artillery unit is still in the rear. It must be one of the Norwegian ships then. It would be nice if we can know who's who now. We might be shooting at our potential allies after all. Certainly. The force we have here is by no means large. Creating more enemies unnecessarily will be bad for us. Schleer, why don't you leave this place to us and try calling them on the common line? Right. Being stopped from continuing her assault, Schleer frowned. If they're going to do that, then they should have tried contacting the Norwegians in advance and launched a coordinated attack. That said, since the storm rendered their long-range communication unusable, that was probably impossible. Moreover, since her initial command did give her soldiers a boost in morale, it was not a bad thing. This is Schleer Henrietta, Commander-in-Chief of the Kalensian Army. Those who wish to surrender, identify yourselves. I don't know what is going on here, but if you don't express your desire to surrender, I will order thorough extermination. Increasing the output of her Schleer arrogantly declared so that those who wish to surrender cannot ignore her. There was nothing but static for a while, but a few minutes after that, a reply came through. This is the former Deputy Commander of the Imperial Guard Fleet, Marshal Lord Yaris Kantram. We are ready to surrender, but we are currently having trouble suppressing dissidents. Since they do not wish to surrender, they are your enemy too. No, let us cooperate and take them down. The voice was hard to hear because of all the static, but Schleer let out a sigh of relief. She doesn't know how much of what Yaris said is true, but it is certain now that there are at least some units that wish to surrender to Kalensia. Don't mess with me. You're the traitor here, you damn rebels. The common line is open to everyone on the battlefield, so even the dissidents chimed in. However, hearing them, Schleer pursed her lips. This is going to be difficult. I appreciate your willingness to cooperate, but our side cannot tell the difference between your side and the enemy. If you cannot have your soldiers identify themselves somehow, then we will have no choice but to attack indiscriminately. The other side sounded a little arrogant, but they are still trying to secure their position after their surrender, and there is a clear difference between those who surrender obediently and those who surrender after a fight. She knows that they are shrewd, but Schleer decides to accept the deputy commander's surrender. Still, both the surrendering enemies and their enemies, in general, are using the same type of weapons. Certainly, the current Kalensian army also has former Norwegian forces fighting for them, but they are distinguishing themselves with a big white stripe on their machines. The surrendering enemy is not the same, and this is not the time for her soldiers to hesitate to shoot. I am going to have the units under my command set the navigation lights to flicker. I'd like you to distinguish them as much as you can. Navigation lights, is it? There were light-emitting devices installed on strikers' heads and shoulders to prevent them from colliding with other strikers when flying in a dark environment. The same goes for ships. However, it would be extremely difficult to be on a lookout for such things in the middle of combat. Thinking so, cold sweat ran down Schleer's forehead. Still, this is probably the best they can improvise at the moment. After all, there's no time to modify their IFF identifying system. Understood. Also, there's one last important question. Where's the Empress? Kalensia must secure her to end this conflict. Of course, if she's still alive, that is. She's currently missing. We'd been able to confirm her presence until about 10 minutes ago, but unfortunately, she has eluded us. We wanted to capture her, but, in other words, it's confirmed that she's alive. Since they've already come this far, they need to pin the blame for this war on the Empress. If it's confirmed that she's alive, then both sides would absolutely need to secure her into custody. I will contact you as soon as we locate Her Majesty's whereabouts. So for now, please help us suppress these dissidents. Understood. In the end, they could not afford to leave a hostile force alone, so albeit annoyed, Schleer agreed. CH-275, the Great Melee 2. Cooperating with the surrendering Norwegians is fine and all, but their current problem is the poor visibility. In this almost complete darkness, it's very difficult to distinguish between friend and foe. Naturally, both sides are war veterans, so they can still tell who's who when they are within sword reach of each other. Meanwhile, Kaisai was the only one using a blaster rifle. Every time a green streak cut through the darkness, you can hear the sound of a Renyan collapsing to the ground. We can barely see, but you can still shoot? Diarose asked with her face twitching. Even with night vision on, the visual is not that reliable because of all the dust and windstorms. If she had to be honest, watching him from the backseat felt like he was reflexively attacking anything that moved. I just have to aim at the strikers with still navigation lights, right? It's easy enough. Since it's you, I think I can trust your skills, but huh? Diarose shrugged. Then, a striker rushed at them with a trail of thruster flames behind it. The charging striker has the same paint color as their Renyans, but its figure is clearly not the same. It's a Zenith type. That surprised me. The Zenith appeared out of nowhere. Perhaps it has been running cover to cover, hiding in the shadow of the rocks in the area. When Diarose jumped in surprise, the white blade of the Zenith was already closing in on them. That won't work on me. However, no surprise attack would be able to catch Kaisai with his guard down. He took out his photon saber at the last second and parried the Zenith's downward swing. Sparks began to fly and a violent shock shook the cockpit. The leg anchors slid across the surface of the ice, leaving a jagged trail as his striker was pushed back. So heavy. For a one-handed strike, the power behind it was unbelievable. A smile floats on Kaisai's face. That must be Threes Gwenrant. She's one of the Imperial Guard captains. Her Zenith is called Arrows. It's a machine specialized in melee combat. When it comes to the aces of the Imperial Guards, Diarose knows everything about them, from their profiles to their strikers' specifications. Naturally, she recognized their attacker. She's good, you know. You should dispatch her quickly. Roger that. If it's a close-range type Zenith, then it would have a great advantage over the long-range type in an environment with such poor visibility. If they let someone like Threes roam free, then there's no doubt that she will cause major damage to their ally. That's the reason they should be the ones to take her down. You're good, White One. Probably did not expect that her surprise attack would be parried. A voice came through the open channel. Even like this, I'm still the Federation's top ace, you see. A man? I see, you. You're the mercenary who deceived Her Highness, right? The enemy pilot, Threes, shouted with a voice filled with hatred. She must have watched the video as well. The following moment, she launched a powerful thrust at Kaisai. He sidestepped and avoided the tip of the blade that was thrust at him with the speed of a bullet. The deceived princess is also here, you know. I'm already head over heels for this man. Nord can go eat SHT for all I care. Diarose immediately provoked her. Because of Diarose's delivery, Threes was confused and her movement was slowed for a moment. Kaisai did not waste that chance and fired his thruster to close in on her striker. With not even time for her to scream, Kaisai's bile bunker roared and an iron stake was thrust into her striker. With a devastating sound of metal being crushed and bent, a large hole formed on the abdomen of the Arrows. The phased transition turbine broke down and hydraulic oil spewed out as Kaisai retracted the iron stake. I have my qualms with winning like this, you know. After he saw Threes' movement, he acknowledged that she has a considerable level of skill. If it's a proper fight, then even Kaisai would need some time to take her down. However, winning like this still felt rather disappointing for him. We can't afford to waste our time with someone like her. Sorry, but you will have to give up your fun time. If it's a one-on-one duel, then I will be your opponent as many times as you want after the war is over. Be patient until then, Diarose said, while proudly sticking her chest up. As an enemy, Diarose hated the idea of confronting Kaisai directly, but a mock battle is a different story. She knows that she stands no chance against him, but if she can be crushed completely by his prowess, then that's exactly what she wants. Sure. If he has to be honest, his opponent just now was definitely tougher than Diarose, but naturally, He hesitated to say such a thing directly. Ignoring the twitch in his facial muscles, Dia-Rose waves her hand dismissively. Anyway, securing the Empress is our top priority right now. The Empress, huh? Seriously, where is she now? Even with Kaisai's supernatural sense, it's still impossible for him to detect someone he has never met before. Right now, they have no choice but to search around the battlefield themselves. There's been no report from our recon units about their Delcroix so far. They would definitely not miss the gigantic monstrosity, so it's likely that the Empress is on a striker right now. Let's look for her with that assumption. Finding the Empress's striker in a situation like this, how unreasonable. Kaisai could only smile wryly at the absurdly difficult task. CH-276, the Great Melee 3. The battleships are practically brushing each other while firing their turrets. Around them, strikers wielding swords and spears are engaging in fierce melee combat. The situation that forced both sides to go at each other with highly destructive weapons at close range has caused horrific damage to both friends and foes. The bottom of the basin, which has become their battlefield, is ridden with scrap metal drenched in oily substance like a mass grave filled with corpses. This is horrible. As a mercenary, Kaisai has witnessed many battlefields, but such a bizarre battle is the first for him. One could call it a great melee. It's messed up, I know. I wouldn't blame anyone who gets sick of fighting after this. Saki complained, but she was jumped by a Renyan. As expected of a semi-zenith machine, its speed was abnormal. TSK. Seeing the approaching blade of its long sword, Saki reflexively unleashed her electromagnetic slash. Her sword shot out of the scabbard like a bullet with purple sparks, cutting her opponent's long sword in the middle. However, that alone was not enough to stop their Renyan's charge. With the same momentum, their Renyan rammed into Saki's Dainsleif. A violent shock shook her cockpit, making Saki's A's roll back for a moment. Their Excalibur quickly approached to help her. Just like Saki, the Imperial Guard who tackled her was also briefly knocked out and couldn't respond to that. A pile bunker pierced the Renyan's abdomen before it could put up any resistance. Their Renyan convulsed before limping and crashing to the ground. My bad. Shaking her dizzy head, Saki apologized. Vold is a race that boasts its toughness, so she only suffered a mild concussion and no other injuries. Don't worry about it. 10 meters tall giants are fighting each other in the darkness with a raging dust storm. Such collisions were happening all over the place. But there's so many here. Isn't this more than what the recon team's report said? Of course. The situation is what it is. Even a recon vessel with top-of-the-line detection equipment would not be able to spot most enemies in such an environment. Still, there are still too many enemies here. They even have battleships firing at each other above them. The majority of the surviving Noridian force on this planet is probably in this basin. It would be one thing if they want to surrender, but if they still want to keep fighting, then they will want to regroup or they won't be able to put up a fight. The battle here is pretty flashy. The scattered enemies are probably gathering here. They're like moths flying into flame. Saki snorted and kept her eyes on the surroundings. She doesn't want to show more of her pathetic side in front of Kaisai. It's nice that the enemies are coming to us, but this battle won't end unless we take the Empress. Isn't that right, Dia-Rose? The one who chimed in was Valentina. Her Colbrand is also charred and there are scratches all over its frame. She must have gone through a fairly intense melee as well. Certainly, if we can capture the Empress, then these rebels would be more docile. I agree. We need to secure her as soon as possible. The problem is that they don't know where the Empress is hiding. The surrendered faction told them that they would notify them as soon as they spotted the Empress, and they've also started looking for her, but so far there's no report from them at all. Maybe the Empress is not here? I think the Empress's personal striker should be very conspicuous. No matter how poor the visibility here is, the odd that no one spotted her so far is. Schlier groaned as her face paled at the possibility. Using this battle as a diversion and run ... Mother, no. The Empress would do that. I agreed, but ... It's also possible that it's what she wants us to think too. Pretending to run away, messing with our search net, and using the opening to withdraw. That's also something she's likely to do. True. The Empress is certainly cunning. We should always assume that she has her ways to outwit us. Even as Diarose and Valentina are discussing the possibilities, the battlefield continues to get worse. A battleship above them suddenly exploded, creating a pillar of fire, illuminating the whole basin for a moment. Kaisai couldn't help but hold his head. Even so, we can't afford to entertain this quagmire of a situation forever. Half measure will not do us any good right now. Even if it's a gamble, we should decide on a clear plan, right? It's rare for you to be assertive like this. What do you think, Schlier? How about we ask my love to search the outer edge of the basin? If it's him, he should be able to more or less rely on his sense. In the middle of a melee, it would be unreasonable to ask him to find someone with his senses, but it would be a different story if there were no enemies around. If the Empress intends to hide herself, there will not be many escorts around her. If it's Kaisai, then he should be able to sniff out a suspicious group right away. I think I can do that, but, with a frown, Kaisai started to ponder. It's certainly not impossible for him, but he's a little reluctant to leave the battlefield. Even a good pilot like Saki just got jumped earlier after all. If possible, he wants to remain here to support his allies. Then please do. There's no one other than my love who can do this after all. That's true. Then Kaisai, we will leave searching for the Empress to you. After a moment of thinking, Schlier agreed to the plan. There's her rational side too, but a part of her also wants Kaisai to be away from the battlefield where people are dying left and right. Even right now, his mind should already be pretty exhausted by all the death so far. But Kaisai replied hesitantly, but Diarose gently patted his head. With a short sigh, he made his decision. I understand. Let's go. All right. You can leave escorting my love to me. Valentina puffed up her plump chest and smiled. Schlier was taken aback with her face twitching for a moment, but she quickly retorted, very well. But I'm going to. She can't leave Kaisai alone, and this melee battle is harsh for her striker since it's specialized in long-range bombardment. Escorting her husband, keeping Valentina in check, and using it as a pretext to leave a battle where she's at a disadvantage. 3 birds with 1 stone. The commander herself is leaving the front line. Diarose grumbled with an exasperated expression, but Schlier simply ignored her. CH 277. The search for the Empress. In the end, it was decided that Kaisai would leave the battle with Schlier and Valentina. They did not assign other escorts. The battle inside the basin is already intense and unpredictable, so they do not want to pull away too much of their force. Because of that, Kaisai and the two are currently flying over the mountain range just outside the basin. Both sides concentrated their forces in the center of the basin, but the outside was so peaceful that it felt like a lie. Aside from their group, there was not even a single striker or warship around at all. But it's not like I'm a man finder, you know. Wouldn't it be better if we have more manpower here? Unlike his usual self, Kaisai doesn't seem to be that confident. He has no plan of losing in the fight, but what they're doing right now is tracking. He was usually used like a radar of some sort, but securing the Empress is something so important that it can change the tide of the war. No matter what, letting her escape is not an option. I've already dispatched as many recon ships as we could. There, Twilight Eyes is sweeping the area as well. Still, with our radar and visuals so unreliable, they won't be of much help even with their specialized equipment. By flying along the rigger line, a small enough group should be able to escape their net. That's why they chose to rely on Kaisai's 6th sense. But, so, are there any signs of them at all, my love? I want to quickly find her and beat her up. Nope, none. Kaisai's reply was extremely brief. However, that's within their expectations. I guess as much. Diarose, who's in the back seat, folded her arm and muttered to herself, rather. The Empress is probably using the new 4 Heavenly as her escorts, right? If even Tursis and the others can't handle them, then they must be quite some aces. This is going to be troublesome. Kaisai frowned while remembering the battle he had with the old 4 Heavenly. 3 of them managed to give him a hard battle. It's terrifying to think that there are 2 more pilots at the level that can corner the 3 of them. About that, I have a plan. The one who came up with a solution was Schleer. If the new Four Heavenly go all out in a defensive battle, they can assume that they won't be able to win easily even with Kaisai at their side. It's also possible that the Empress will be able to conjure something up when they're busy dealing with them as well. This area has our old communication lines and radio bases installed underground. That's why we should be able to connect with our main force even in this condition. If the new Four Heavenly show up, we call the old Four Heavenly. Well, that's a simple strategy. Schleer pouted at Valentina's comment. It will take some time for them to arrive, but there's no other way. Aside from Kaisai-san, they are the only group who can at least hold back the new Four Heavenly after all. Right. If everything goes well, then they might even be able to crush the new Four Heavenly after all. Or they will try. Let's have them stall the enemy until rescue arrives then. Humiliated at the hands of the new Four Heavenly, Tursis and the others seem to be burning with the desire to get even. Personally, Kaisai himself does have some interest in fighting them, but he would only feel bad snatching someone else's prey. That said, that's only if we find the Empress. Since there's no sign of her so far, there's no need to worry about that right now. Still, a full planetary search would be overkill, right? Galia is not a very large planet, but it's still unreasonable to search the whole planet for a single striker. Even if they decide to go that route, it would be nice if they know what they want to look for. I thought you'd say that, so I came up with a plan. With a grin, Diarose tapped on Kaisai's shoulder. Kaisai is currently piloting, so she's plenty of time to think. Diarose put up a tactical map on Kaisai's sub-monitor. Her expression looked like it was saying, I'm here for a situation like this. First, we should start thinking like the Empress. And there's no doubt that our first priority would be to escape from this system. Tactically speaking, there's no way for her to recover from this battle anymore after all. It would be natural to think that she wants to get back to her home turf safely for now. And, as though she was saying that goes without saying, Valentina grins and urges her to continue. Even so, there are many obstacles preventing the Empress from safely escaping. The Noridian main forces certainly landed on Higali, but the small units should still be in orbit. That included the surrendered noble forces as well. With a grin, Diarose leaned out of her seat and pointed at the monitor in front of Kaisai with her finger. As he was crushed by her plump chest from behind, he moaned in a small voice, with Duchess Angel in our custody, there's a possibility that the noble forces will try to capture the Empress to exchange her for their mistress. A ransom for a family head is always exorbitant after all. That's what evolved loyalty amounts to. Those who sincerely obey the Empress are mostly only her imperial guards. If betrayal can bring more benefits to them, then the nobles would turn their back to the Empress without batting an eye. In other words, even if she managed to get to space, the Empress would still be under threat. If she leaves the planet normally, that is, the polar orbit. Schleer clapped her hand as though she realized something. Both the Kalanchian fleets and the Noridian noble fleets should be circling the orbit of Galia right now. Naturally, they're waiting to intercept the enemy. Of course, the Empress should be wary of them, so she would pick a route to avoid them. If that's the case, then the polar orbit comes to mind. It is a route that passes over the north and south poles of the planet. Because of that, the fleets would need some time to arrive at their point of exit. Exactly. And here's the main subject. If she intends to swing herself away at the polar orbit, then she will need a mass driver facing either the north or the south pole and a ride booster. If she wants to escape back to Noridian territory alone, then she can't waste her propellant by breaking through the atmosphere with her Striker's engine. After all, Galia has gravity and atmospheric density that's thin enough for Strikers to enter and exit its satellite orbit without any problems. However, if she intends to travel an ultra-long distance, then she will have to consider her limited fuel, thus she needs to minimize its usage to some extent. I see. So the Empress is aiming to get to our Supuli base. Their Supuli base is utilizing a mass driver and mass catcher for sending and collecting supplies, with ride boosters on standby for Striker transportation. It has everything the Empress requires to escape the planet. A Supuli base with a mass driver pointing to either north or south pole. This place, A red dot lit up on the tactical map. It's not far from where they are right now. Seriously, your head is really the only good thing about you, huh? Very well, shall we? Valentina concluded with a wry smile. CH-278, Assault on the Supplely Base. Although they called it a Supplely Base, the only thing visible from outside the base itself is a metal shutter installed halfway up an iceberg. Most of the facilities are set up underground, and even the most conspicuous facility, the mass driver itself, which is a mass ejection device that looks like a roller coaster rail, is retracted and camouflaged inside an armored dome. As far as I can see, there's nothing unusual here though. At the base's front gate, Dio-Rose groaned to herself. The armored shutter gate was shut close and there was not even a single scratch on it. No sign of anyone trying to force their way in either. I've checked the sensors and the logs show no record of anyone entering or leaving this place in the 24 hours, said Schleer as she removed the cable connecting the terminal next to the shutter to her. Miss Tiltwine. Naturally, the base is equipped with a security system to keep away intruders. However, everything here says that there are no abnormalities. Neither the infrared sensor nor the vibration sensor seem to detect anything out of the ordinary. Do you think we are wrong? The Empress should already know the locations of all the bases on Galii. After all, albeit only for a brief period, this place was under the control of Nord for a time. Naturally, they would have mapped out the whole planet, and such information should have already been sent to the Empress's personal vessel. That's why if the Empress plans to use the escape plan that Dio-Rose predicted, she would definitely visit this place. However, since there's no sign of intruders here, they need to entertain the idea that Dio-Rose's prediction might be off. One question though. Is this place currently manned? Yes. Naturally, I'd station people here, but since the planned drop site for the satellite is not that far from here, I've issued a withdrawal order to them just in case. So it's unmanned right now? Then that would be strange, isn't it? Kaisai frowned at Schlier's reply. He lightly pushed his control stick forward and continued. I can feel faint signs of people here. I don't think this place is deserted. My love, did you not say that there was no sign of the enemy here earlier? Valentina asked. Their current strategy relies on Kaisai's unnatural detection ability. Of course, when they arrived at the Supplely base, they had him check for any hostile presence, and the reply they got from him was that there were no enemies around. I didn't judge them as enemies because I don't feel the hostility or murderous intent from them. Rather, their fighting spirit is just so weak that I don't think it belongs to front-line soldiers. That's why I thought they were staff we stationed in the rear. There's no way that's the case. All soldiers and staff of this base should have already been transferred to the rear already. So if there's truly someone here, I think that they are the enemy. Schleer tilted her head and frowned. She would never question Kaisai's ability. If he said something is there, it's there. With that in mind, her expression immediately turned grim. It's probably the Empress. Valentina crossed her arms and turned her gaze at the gate's terminal. Electronic warfare is one of the Noridian army's specialties. It would not be strange for them to be capable of fabricating the logs of an outdated security system like this one. They hacked the security system, walked through the front door, and faked the logs. That's what you're saying? Schlier's face turned bitter. Unfortunately, the security system here is quite old-fashioned. An ultra-high-performance system of the Empress's personal striker should be able to easily hack it. It might even be able to do that automatically. But it's strange that Master doesn't feel any hostility or fighting spirit from them at all. If it's just the Empress, then, well, I say that it might be possible if she simply wants to escape. That woman is quite a coward after all. True. She's the mother of someone who ran from a duel without hesitation after all. It's scary how these traits are so inheritable. You were supposed to come out of the same womb as I though? Well, whatever. Dio-Rose's face turned a little sad at the fact that even at a time like this, Valentina still remembers to chide her, but she simply let out a sigh and switched her mood. The Empress sighed. The problem here is dealing with her guards. Considering her personality, it's impossible that she took separate action and left herself unprotected. In other words, it would be better to think that those guarding her right now are someone who bore neither hostility nor fighting spirit on the battlefield. You mean the clone soldiers you mentioned before? Well, they've already broken the biological experiment pact by creating them. It wouldn't be strange if they go a step further and tamper with their emotions too. Kaisai frowned. As someone who rather enjoys the feelings of people on the battlefield, it's hard for him to forgive such an act. That's highly likely. Anyway, it's certain that the enemies are inside. It would be troublesome if they managed to use the mass driver to get to the satellite orbit. We're going in. After confirming the time on her watch, Dairo said so and everyone nodded in agreement. CH-279. The new 4 Heavenly intercept. In any case, their top priority is to secure the Empress as soon as possible. After requesting help from Tursis and the others, the party rushed inside the Supuli base. Kaisai groaned as he looked around. Currently, he's inside a connecting passageway for carrying in supplies. The passage itself was designed for vehicles carrying large containers to pass through, so they are very wide. Even the 12 meters tall giants they are piloting can walk around freely inside. The inside looked like a corridor of flat walls made of reinforced concrete. The place felt so dry and cold that it sent chills down their spines. The white lights installed on the ceiling were faint and unnerving as well. It just felt like an enemy could appear from any corner to ambush them. My love, can you tell where they are? Nope. Their presences are somewhat faint. I can't accurately tell like usual. This might be a little bad for us. This is unexpected. It seems the clone soldiers are more troublesome than I first thought. Valentina groans as she rubs her chin. Ordinary soldiers would be detected using Kaisai's senses, so they've used his ability in place of their radar. But, putting the clones aside, can you sense the Empress? Schleer interjected. Yes. The clones are merely escorts. Their objective is still the Empress. It's difficult since we are a closed space, you see. Placing a finger on his forehead, Kaisai bitterly groaned. Even if they tell him to detect their presence, what he feels are just some vague signs. It's not something so clear-cut. Seeing Kaisai groaning with cold sweat dripping down his face, Dairo smiled wryly at him. Well, we know what they are after here. There's no need for us to search the entire base. There might even be waiting to ambush us ahead. Right. Dairos exasperatedly stared at Schleer, who seemed surprised. Her huge indigo striker even looked somewhat embarrassed as it looked away. It was so human-like that you sometimes can't think of it as a simple weapon. In other words, we need to check out the mass driver. I'm almost certain that they came here just for that. At worst, we can just destroy the mass driver ourselves. Destroying it. The construction and upkeep costs of mass driver facilities are not cheap. Since the Kalanchian royal family budget is in a dire state due to the war, Schleer personally would like to avoid creating unnecessary spending. However, since they cannot afford to let the Empress escape, that might be their only choice. What? Don't worry about it. It's just a small mass driver facility after all. The rebuilding cost should be a chump change for this self-proclaimed next Empress, right? Valentina, who wasn't paying attention, turned toward them with a surprisingly sour look on her face. Of course, although hers is the lowest seat, she still belongs to a family of great power. She is not without money. That said, it's not the kind of money that she can casually produce. I don't mind. As long as I get the throne, I can use as much money as I want after all. As expected of my little sister. That's exactly the attitude a ruler should take. Dairos, you keep quiet. Seeing Dairos's silent grin, a small smile floated on Kaisai's face. Anyway, let's head to the base of the mass driver as fast as possible. We don't know when they might arrive after all. At worst, they might already be preparing for launch. Dairo spoke in a tense voice to compensate for the easygoing mood earlier. Naturally, all three raised their voices to affirm her. The mass driver's injection chamber should be just straight ahead. The base is not large, so they reached a large gate in no time following Schleer's guidance. She then immediately operated the gate's control panel, This might be an ambush, Kaisai warned. It may be difficult for him to grasp the presence of the clones, but he can tell that there are enemies on the other side of the gate. However, he cannot tell their exact number. If they are ordinary soldiers, then he would be able to tell, but in this case... So they got here first, huh? Kaisai-san, please step back a little. Kaisai nodded and took a few steps back as Schlier operated the panel. With a dull sound, the armored shutter began to lift. As they predicted, low-powered blaster bullets rained down on their Mistletoe that stood in front. Schlier hastily put the Mistletoe shoulder in front, using the shield mounted on it to cover herself and retreat. Schlier, Valentina yelled. A black and white Zenith carrying a gigantic sword rushed at Schlier with a furious speed. It's the Geist Vector that fought Tursis and the others in the earlier battle. TSK. With no time to retreat, Schlier immediately unsheathed the Zweihander from her shoulder-mounted shield. However, before she could activate the built-in electromagnetic ejection, an anti-ship missile was fired from behind her, intercepting the Geist Vector's advance. No matter how thick a striker's armor is, it cannot withstand a blow from an anti-ship missile. Knowing that, their Geist Vector activated its right foot anchor and made a sharp turn. Take this. Schlier did not miss that chance and fired her thruster, dashing forward with her shield. Her large striker accelerated at once and shoulder tackled their Geist Vector that had lost its balance. Even a super high-performance Zenith cannot withstand such a powerful tackle, so it was knocked backward. Using the same momentum, Schlier and the others rushed into the mass driver launch site. Isolated from the outside world, the mass driver launch site, which is covered by a huge armored dome, is large enough for strikers to engage in combat. Inside, there was a mass driver that looked like a roller coaster rail and 4 black and white Zeniths. That must be all of the new 4 Heavenly then. This is going to be a difficult battle. Following Schlier, Valentina muttered with her face slightly twitching. CH-280. Wicked Star vs the new 4 Heavenly One. Since the mass driver was designed to launch containers and ships, the dome that houses the facility itself is extremely large. The ceiling is very tall and the place is wide enough for strikers to move around uninhibited. As expected. This is going to be troublesome after all. Schlier grumbled as she fired off her heavy machine gun. Their Geist Vector, on the other hand, swiftly soars through her line of fire and continues to approach her. Despite its ridiculously oversized guillotine blade, it's as nimble as any lightweight Zenith would. Don't worry about them. As long as we can take down that mass driver, then it's our victory. I know that already. Still, the mass driver was built with the same materials they built warships with. Even with Mistletoe's firepower, it's not something that can be destroyed with a couple of shots. Moreover, since the clones are bearing down on them, they can't focus and shoot at the mass driver itself. Schlier stepped back a little and fired her shoulder-mounted cannon, but the green beam simply dispersed after it scratched the surface of the mass driver. Arg, who ordered them to build it this strong? In their situation, it would be impossible to find an opening to focus on destroying the mass drive mid-fight. That's why she focused on defeating the foe in front of her for the time being. But I still can't see the Empress around. That woman, just where is she hiding? Valentina pondered for a moment before her thought was interrupted by their Geist Artillery's bombardment. It seems that it reduced the firepower since they are within a confined space, but their Geist Artillery's still packed enough power to kill her instantly with a direct hit. Valentina kicked the road and jumped to escape the spine-chilling bombardment. After a brief moment, the beam landed and completely scooped out the reinforced concrete, and the scattered shards were hurled at their Colbrand's armor. My love, let's take that thing down together. Prolonging this fight will not be good for us. Originally, the plan is to have the old 4 Heavenly deal with the clone soldiers. However, no matter how big the place is, this dome is still a confined space. They can't move around as they did in an open field. At this rate, one of them might not be able to avoid a direct hit. Got it. Even Kaisai finds the clones to be difficult foes. Their thin presences remain consistent even after the battle began in earnest. Since it is difficult to detect them, he can't predict his enemy's movement as well as he usually can. That's why he's willing to do anything, even ganging up on his enemy, to reduce their number. Dai rose. I've heard about the Fector and artillery, but what about those guys? The striker Kaisai is facing has Tunfus in both of its hands. There's also another striker dual-wielding 8 barrels organ cannons. Both are colored black and white and seem to belong to the same Geist series as the Fector and artillery, with auxiliary claws on their shoulders. The Tunfa one is Geist Kampfer, and the one with the organ cannons is ... I think it's Geistjäger. That thing is supposed to be the Geist Artillery's close-range weapon, though. They must be the new Heavenly Eye and Heavenly Roar, respectively. Their Heavenly Eye probably had to switch to close-quarter combat because it cannot use sniper equipment in a confined space like this, so that's probably not its main weapon. Huh? Well, but I have to warn you, they are not opponents that Master can easily defeat alone, you know. After all, these new 4 Heavenly had overwhelmed the old 4 Heavenly before with just 2 of them. Even if Schleer and Valentina's ability as a pilot could be categorized as ace class, no, you can even call them first-rate aces, but they are not super first-rate aces. Against such opponents, who knows how long they can hold their own. Moreover, there's no doubt that the 2 will burden Kaisai in this fight. Of course. Shouting in reply, Kaisai pointed the muzzle of his Mega Blaster rifle at Geist Kampfer, that's closing in on them. He pulled the trigger and an extra thick beam was fired at the aggressor. There, Geist Kampfer casually dodged the beam. Kaisai immediately fired a follow-up shot, but there, Geistjäger rained down 50mm shells on him with its organ cannons. With a total of 16 barrels, a bombardment from them is more than enough to turn a heavily armored striker into scraps in an instant. With such a wide area of bombardment, it's hard to dodge all of the shells. Kaisai managed to fire his thruster and escaped from the shower of shells, but there, Geist Kampfer immediately jumped out and followed him. Exterminate! Kaisai managed to catch the Tunfa with his photon saber he pulled out with his left hand, but at the same time, the auxiliary claws on the Kampfer's shoulders began to attack their Excalibur forearms. Interesting. But Kaisai is not someone who can be defeated so easily. By using their Excalibur's body to deflect the blow, he managed to escape the claws. The tip of the claws scraped against the chest armor, making a loud screeching noise. My love. There, Colbrand charged in with its lance. There, Geist Kampfer took a casual step to avoid the charge, but thanks to that Kaisai was given an opportunity to retreat. Thanks, with the auxiliary claws, dealing with it at close range became twice as difficult than a normal striker. He wants to keep his distance, but closing in. Supported by the shower of shells from the organ cannons, there, Geist Kampfer rushed at him again with a bullet-like speed. It would be difficult to keep his distance when his opponent has such acceleration power. Judging so, a fierce smile floated on Kaisai's face. So what? I'm taking you down. CH-281. Wicked Star vs the new 4 Heavenly 2. The Tunfa strike that Geist Kampfer threw at him was parried by his photon saber, but naturally, the attack was followed by blaster shots from the auxiliary claws. Seeing the claws approaching, Kaisai immediately fired the head-mount machine gun at them. Left auxiliary claws damaged. Even a 12.77 pea shooter could deal significant damage when the shots land inside the muzzle. The claw's internal instructor was damaged with its loading chamber blown off by the detonation of the particles loaded inside, causing a small explosion. As a result, the left claw started to convulse and stopped moving. Minor damage sustained. Resuming battle. However, even though that was supposed to be a surprise attack, the voice from the radio was still as emotionless as a computer. There, Geist Kampfer thrusts its Tunfus outward and unleashes a tornado-like spinning attack. The physical prowess of the Geist series is beyond even that of the Zareva. Even with the Excalibur's upgraded armor, a direct hit would be no joke. Judging so, Kaisai immediately took a step back. Commence fire support. There, Geistjäger fired its organ cannons. Even with Kaisai's skills, it's still impossible to completely evade a barrage from 16 barrel cannons. Clenching his teeth, Kaisai turned the thruster to full power. The jet flame of the main thruster scorched the reinforced concrete road and the white striker managed to get away from the enemy's line of fire. Seeing the reinforced concrete literally getting evaporated, Diarose let out a pathetic cry. Rather than destroyed, it would be more accurate to describe it as annihilated. The firepower from 250mm 8-barrel organ cannons was simply overkill. My love, get back. However, just because he avoided the bombardment, it didn't mean that Kaisai's ordeal was over. Almost at the same time, Valentina's voice rang out. An extra thick beam with an output that shouldn't be used in an indoor area suddenly raced toward the Excalibur. Little. Kicking off the road below, he managed to get away just in time. The beam missed its target and directly hit the armor dome, making the armor plate that could even withstand the shot from the battleship's turrets red hot. They are focusing on us, right? What are my foolish sister and that stupid princess doing? I'm so sorry. Who are you calling foolish sister? Diarose raised her complaint, but Schleer was already trying her best to keep their Jesset Fector busy while Valentina was trying to support Kaisai, but with the blaster shots from their Jaeger and Kampffire's auxiliary claws, she couldn't do much. Speed, power, firepower. The troublesome auxiliary claws that move like they have a mind of their own. Kaisai is one thing, but the enemies this time are simply too much for Schleer and Valentina to handle. The calmest part of his brain is already urging them to retreat. But I can't afford to do that now. Can I? However, he quickly dismissed the idea and reignited his fighting spirit. If they lose sight of the Empress here, she will definitely return to her country and launch another invasion. Her army certainly suffered great damage in this battle, but the Nord Empire probably has more than enough to rebuild its army. On the other hand, Kalanshia does not have enough power to repel another invasion. Both their supplies and war budget are already running low as it is. Reorganizing their army for another invasion would be extremely difficult. There is no way for Kalanshia to win other than to capture the Empress here. That's why withdrawal is not an option. If I can take one down, then I will be able to manage somehow. Kaisai muttered so as he observed the battle. There, Geist Artillery is reloading its particle cartridges. There, Kampfer was beelining toward him again, while the Jaeger is providing covering fire. Only there, Fector was kept busy as it had to desperately avoid the fierce fire from Schleer. Valentina, go help Schleer. What? I see, got it. After quickly assessing the situation, Kaisai ordered. Valentina hesitated for a moment, but she immediately agreed and turned back. Rather than some limited support, it would be better if she team up with Schleer and take down their Fector first. After he saw her off, Kaisai grinned and fired his thruster, taking cover behind the mass driver. Sure enough, their Jaeger stops firing at him in fear of damaging it. Instead, their Kampfer closed in on him again. No escape. Who said I was escaping? Seconds before the Tunfa strike hit the armor of Excalibur, Kaisai kicked off the road and jumped straight up. At the same time, he fired the anti-ship grenade launcher mounted on his back. There, Geist Kampfer leaned back to avoid the missile. Missing its target, the missile exploded on the road below. Master, I know. It's clear that his attack was ineffective. Kaisai continuously fires his Mega Blaster rifle toward the smoke screen. He could make out the trail of thruster flame in the smoke. The moment he realized that his shots were avoided, his enemy returned fire with its rapid-fire blaster cannon. Schleer. While screaming out her name, Kaisai fired his thruster and flew up. As he left the cover of the mass driver, there, Geist Jaeger and Artillery immediately locked onto him again. In addition, there, Kampfer chased after him from below. It was a dire situation as he's now being targeted by 3 strikers simultaneously. In the back seat, Diarose held her breath. However, a wide smile floats on Kaisai's face. He then took a deep breath and shouted, "Shoot me!" CH-282 Wicked Star vs the new 4 Heavenly 3. Shoot me. Without questioning Kaisai's words, Schleer activated the anchor on one leg and made a sharp turn, pointing her shoulder-mounted blaster cannon at Excalibur. The IFF system was blaring an alarm as she was pointing her weapon at an ally, but she ignored it and pulled the trigger. An arrow of light traveling at sunlight speed flies out at the same moment the high-pitched gunshot rang out. As it flew toward Kaisai, he batted the beam away with his photon saber. The repulsive force of the beam repels each other and a heavy impact runs through the machine. Deviated from its intended target, the high-powered beam headed toward the Geist Kampfer, which was about to strike their Excalibur from below! Even the clone was surprised by such an unexpected attack. Unable to even take an evasive maneuver, the beam hit the Kampfer directly at its waist. Their Geist series may boast its power and speed, but its armor is not particularly different from those of other high-performance strikers. In an instant, their Kampfer's lower body exploded into pieces. A half-destroyed drum-shaped part rolled out from the upper of the Kampfer, which slammed into the reinforced concrete road below. It was the phased transition turbine. A striker's main power source. Naturally, with such an important part destroyed, their Kampfer has already been completely incapacitated. It's down, Master. Do it. Of course. Kaisai nodded and started accelerating at full throttle. The troublesome close combat specialist was already out of commission. Moreover, exploiting the moment when his enemy's formation collapsed would greatly bring the battle to his advantage. Geist Kampfer, incapacitated. Pilot, Veer's status unknown. Adjusting battle strategy. However, despite having their comrade shot down, their Geistjäger's movement remains calm. With cold precision, the muscles of the organ cannons unleash a devastating barrage toward Kaisai. What an unlovable bunch! Diarose muttered while clicking her tongue. The clone's emotions were suppressed so it would be difficult to agitate them. Even so, Kaisai slips through the barrage with small turns. The stray bullets hit the mass driver, causing some dangerous discharge. Diarose looked down at the rail below with some expectations that it might be enough to render the mass driver unusable, but unfortunately, other than some scraped paint, there was no damage. No choice but to use the giant blaster cannon to destroy the thing. Aside from a well-placed concentrated fire, it appears that the giant cannon there, Geist Artillery, is carrying would be needed to destroy the mass driver. Diarose's gaze wandered in search of the artillery, hoping that they could bait an attack from it. Master. The moment she spotted the Geist Artillery, she saw crimson light gathering on the muzzle of its weapon. However, a moment before Diarose's voice could reach his ear, Kaisai was already yanking back his control stick. After a brief moment, a torrent of supercharged beams passed through the place where the Excalibur was. The scattered particles bubbled the pure white armor of the Excalibur, with popping sounds ringing inside the cockpit. To add insult to injury, the line of fire was just slightly off the mass driver. It appears that their opponent's aim was extremely calculated. Considering the cold composure of the clone soldiers, baiting an attack from them doesn't seem to be a viable strategy. Truly some nasty opponents. There's no other way but to take them down one by one. The moment Kaisai shouted while avoiding the barrage from the enemy's organ cannons. Suddenly, the armored dome began to move with a heavy sound. Dust and dry ice pebbles rained down from above. No good. The preparation process was already done. The reason why the armored dome is opening can only be one. The Empress is now ready to make her escape. Since the Empress's figure couldn't be spotted here, it was safe to assume that she will come in through one of the gates to get on the rail. It was the moment when Diarose's gaze turned toward a gate. Oh no! At the same time Kaisai's voice rang out, a new striker appeared behind Excalibur. The striker was colored black and white with auxiliary arms. It appears like it had been concealing its presence using optical camouflage equipment. The new Geist series thrusts at the back of the Excalibur. Kaisai managed to move away to avoid a direct hit, but he was too late and the silver blade pierced the base of the Excalibur's right shoulder. The electrical wires inside were severe and hydraulic oil started spewing out like blood from the cracked armor plate. They got me one. Kaisai immediately kicked the chest of the new Geist, and took some distance. Without looking back, he fired the anti-ship grenade launcher while performing a somersault. The new Geist couldn't move due to the impact from the kick and couldn't avoid the missile. With a direct hit on its abdomen, it suffers the same fate as their Campfire, with its upper and lower body torn apart in two different directions. The damage from its surprise attack would at most the Excalibur's right arm useless, while the new Geist was shot down, so it's not a bad result. However, the opening it created can be fatal. Kaisai, the Empress. From the gate, a black gold zenith straddling a ride booster dashed out. Schleer tried to tell him, but currently, there's no one that has enough leeway to intercept the Empress from getting to the injection chamber. Unobstructed, the Empress raced toward the mass driver on her ride booster. Kya-ha-ha-ha-ha, the victory is mine. The Empress's voice could be heard through the radio. Just like that, the black gold zenith was launched by the mass driver and flew away with ferocious force. The acceleration power the mass driver provided was enough for her to break through the atmosphere, and no one here would be able to intercept her in time. Yug, that woman, she got away. Diarose raises her voice in anger while Kaisai, Schleer, and Valentina cannot even afford to do that, as they have their hands full dealing with the clones. Diarose was the only one who was hatefully glaring at the back of the Empress as she disappeared into the sky. But, at that moment, a red beam suddenly flew from the surface and accurately hit the Empress's ride booster. Yuah! The ride booster immediately exploded and the Empress's pathetic scream could be heard through the com channel. Phew! The last laugh is mine. Lyran? That's right, the ace sniper of the old Four Heavenly. There, Heavenly Eye. Lyran slain. CH-283. The fleeing Empress. The Empress's ride booster was sniped out of the sky and exploded into pieces. The black gold zenith took the full brunt of the blast, but due to its heavy armor, the striker was undamaged. Although it was staggered, it started ascending again using its own thrusters. You got rusty, Lyran. Despite the destruction of the ride booster, the striker still has enough power to break through the atmosphere on its own. Coupled with the acceleration provided by the mass driver, it would be difficult to catch up with the Empress. I'm just giving up the credit, intentionally. In response, Lyran replied with a snort. The weather conditions and visibility are the worst, but despite all that, Lyran wouldn't miss her mark. There was also how she missed her shot when she was piloting their Valizer, so her pride as a sniper won't allow her to miss her target twice. Cavalry has arrived, Desu. Nora raised her voice. Since Lyran is already on the scene, it's natural that the other Four Heavenly would be the two. There, Zareva swooped down from above the opened armored dome and fired her magnums at their Geistjäger, which was aiming its organ cannons at Kaisai. Enemy reinforcements detected. Adjusting interception strategy. Whoa. I can't let Nora-chan take the spotlight alone now, can I? A barrage from a Gatling gun rained down on their artillery, as it was about to provide covering fire for their Jaeger. In addition, their Van Wolf and their Dainsleif rushed at their Vector. At the same time, even the clones seemed to be taken aback at the sudden assault and quickly retreated. My lord, leave this place to us. We should be able to handle these clones ourselves. Now is your chance to capture the Empress alive. I see. If Lyran's shot killed the Empress, then there won't be anyone to take responsibility for this war. Schleer muttered out loud. The old Four Heavenlies strikers were already tattered, but their fighting spirit is still high. Moreover, with Saki, Kalanchia's top ace practically unharmed, they stand a good chance of winning in a 5v3. The new Four Heavenly, although technically that should be 5 with the addition of the 5th striker that was shot down earlier, are doing their best to deal with the new arrivals, so they have no time to attack Kaisai. If he wants to pursue the Empress, then now is his chance. Let's leave this place to them and go after the Empress. Schleer pointed to the mass driver and shouted. For a moment, Kaisai hesitated. Schleer and Valentina aside, he thought he should stay here to handle their formidable enemies. However, with Schleer exhausted from the long battle and the Empress's strength still unknown, there is a good chance that the Empress might get away. Right now, capturing the Empress should take priority. Let's go. I feel the same way. For better or worse, That's my mother after all. I wouldn't want to leave this to someone else. Dia-Rose also seemed to have a lot in her mind. Kaisai silently nodded and they flew toward the mass driver. When he got to the launch shuttle, mechanical arms extended from both sides of the rail and fixed the striker in place by grabbing its shoulders. Schleer and Valentina followed after him. Kaisai and I will be enough. Please stay here and support Tursis Sands group. Schleer tried to dissuade Valentina from following them. She and Valentina are currently allies, but once they take care of the Empress, their cooperation would come to an end. In that case, their rivalry over Kaisai would return. In the unlikely event that she tries to forcibly take Kaisai or that she demands her to hand over Kaisai in exchange for the Empress, would she be able to handle Valentina on her own? Schleer furrowed her brows as that question echoed in her mind. After all, with the battlefield in chaos, she could not expect support from her allies. I can't do that. There are subordinates who chose to follow me. I need to show them that I can overcome the Empress with my own ability. Valentina's reply made it clear that she could sense Schleer's inner turmoil. She also has some suspicions, so she could not afford to let down her guard. After separating your force and forming an anti-Nord faction, the general joined hands with her enemy to take down the Empress. Seriously? That's some opera-worthy scenario, huh? I know that you want to take credit for this, but considering the relationship between the two armies, wouldn't it be more convenient if we make this a joint effort instead? Hearing that, Schleer fell silent. I don't really care, but if we don't quickly catch up, the Empress will get away, you know? Dia-Rose anxiously sweeps her eyes around. The clones are still being held back by Tursis and the others. However, as their strikers are already fixed on the launching platform, they cannot take any evasive maneuvers. Even just a stray bullet can spell their end here. Right, let's go. In the end, Schleer consented. She then operates the mass driver's control system via the touch panel, checking launch preparations. All green. Condenser charged. Let's go. When she touched the red button labeled launch, the shuttle was ejected like a bullet. The rail furiously accelerated it as they raced toward the sky. Strong G, incomparable to a striker catapult or warship, attacked Kaisai's body, and a quiet scream leaked from his mouth. When the shuttle reached the end of the rail, it opened and launched the three strikers to the sky. As he ignited the thrusters, Kaisai pulled his control stick while clenching his teeth. We're going into the clouds. The altimeter steadily shows increasing value. There, Excalibur burst into the dark cloud covering the sky of Galii. Lumps of dry ice and debris from the satellite impact were still swirling in the sky, and small shards were hitting the armor, making dry sounds from the impact. Inside the clouds, the visibility was practically zero and they couldn't even see a meter in front of them. The dust storm also created electrical discharge, and a massive bolt of lightning struck there. Excalibur, with a deafening roar. Hi-ah! Surprised, Dia-Rose let out a childlike scream while Kaisai silently looked at the striker's status on the sub-monitor. The damage he sustained was the slashed right arm that was damaged by the clone's surprise attack. Other than that, there was no abnormality. As expected of the chief mechanic, the maintenance was superb. Kaisai grinned. Meanwhile, they passed through the cloud layer. Since the atmosphere of Galii is very thin, they've already reached outer space. Thus began their pursuit of the Empress. CH-284, Pursuit. Kaisai and his group, who had launched themselves using the mass driver, broke through the thundercloud and entered the satellite orbit of Galii. As to be expected, the Empress's striker is nowhere to be found. She probably already left, although they're in satellite orbit. Since Galii's atmosphere is very, this is the altitude they are actually at, is relatively low. The ground seemed so close that they almost felt that they could reach for it if they reached out their hand. For someone who's unfamiliar with space traveling, they would have been worried that they might just plummet to the ground. At this altitude, the effect of the storm is still too strong. I don't think we can rely on our radar here. Schleer let out a small sigh as she looked at the radar screen on her sub-monitor. The radar screen was filled with radar noises and it was impossible for them to detect the Empress using it. Still, We don't have the time to climb the altitude to escape the storm's effect. If the Empress manages to get to where she can use sublight speed, then it would be difficult to track her down with just the three of us. You can only travel faster than light speed at the outer edge of the star system, but you can still travel at barely the speed of light once you are far enough away from high-mass objects. Ideally, they need to secure the Empress before she can reach that point. For the time being, let's predict where she's heading. With just the three of us, we cannot split up and search randomly. Since our time is limited, it's probably best if we have some general idea in mind. Kaisai glared out into space and muttered, Gaily system is located near the center of the galaxy, so the stars dotting the sky surrounding it are much denser than the night sky of Terra. In other words, the Empress has many escape routes. If the Empress is allowed to escape out of the system, then it would be impossible for them to capture her. At the moment we are flying at the polar orbit of Gaily. If we follow this route, then we should be able to track her to some extent, but their original plan was to begin their pursuit from here. After all, even if the Empress is not in sight, they should be able to follow her to some extent since they're flying in the same orbit. Because Lyran shot down her ride booster. No, thanks to her, the Empress's plan should be completed in disarray right now. It's very possible that she's not going to follow her planned route. Diarose pondered while stroking the control stick with her finger. Without a ride booster, it would be impossible for her to directly fly back to Nord's territory. She will need to find a new ride booster somewhere, but even if a ride booster is a striker's common auxiliary equipment, it doesn't mean that they are just left lying everywhere. She has two choices: steal a ride booster from somewhere or get on board a vessel that's capable of FTL travel. If she goes with the latter, then it would be troublesome for us. We can't just inspect every suspicious vessel in this situation after all. No, that's not necessarily true. The surrounding systems are already aware that there's a battle going on here. There shouldn't be any civilian ships in this area. In that case, her only choice would be to board a Noridian ship. Still, the Noridian force that was left in space had already surrendered to us after all. Every unit that still intends to fight us has already descended to Gaily E2. Diarose nodded at Kaisai's words. The Empress's subordinates had already turned against her. A lord who prematurely surrendered cannot keep the trust of their subjects. Knowing how cautious she is, she wouldn't take that fact lightly. Diarose looked like she wanted to say something more, but she only let out a sigh. Then she's only left with one option, and the only place she can be sure that she can procure a ride booster around here is there really such a palace? As of now, there are no other ports or bases in the Gaily system. The only celestial body that had a military base in this system is Gaily. Knowing that, Schleer knitted her brows and groaned. There are plenty, right? A ship that deployed strikers should have a couple of ride boosters lying around after all. The sunken ship? Exactly. Unlike in naval battles where your ship would sink to the bottom of the ocean when it sank, incapacitated spaceships would just be left abandoned in the same place it was shot. Since they were fighting in satellite orbit, it would be more accurate to say that they are orbiting around the planet. Scavenging supplies from those ships is not that difficult. I see. When our fleet battled the Angel fleet, quite a few ships had been sunk. It would be weird if her aim is to scavenge those. Valentina clapped her hand. The surrendered Angel fleet was guided a distance away from the planet so that they couldn't intervene in the battle on the surface. As a result, there shouldn't be too many ships in the area. A perfect situation for the Empress to sneakily scavenge whatever she needs. That's how it is. That place is close to the equator. She went out of her way to make her exit at the polar orbit too. What a shame. Diarose shrugged. In order to transition from polar orbit to equatorial orbit, the Empress would need to make a 90 degrees correction after all. Anyway, this makes things simple. Let's get there at once, said Schleer while confirming the calculated course correction the computer came up with for their next destination. CH-285, Impromptu Space Reef. The geostationary orbit where they can travel at sunlight speed aside, the low orbit which is very close to the planet itself forces the group to travel slowly using only their standard propulsion engine. As a result, It took a while for Kaisai's group to arrive at their destination. This is. Dairose groaned as she looked around. Surrounding them are strikers' limbs and armor plates that seem to have been blown apart from a warship. Furthermore, there is a large amount of small and large debris floating around, such as a battleship that has been split into halves. The rescue operation for the pilots and crews has already been completed in this area, and there were no rescue vessels in the area. There was not even an SOS signal of any kind. With only the wreckages around and no sign of life, the place felt like a desolate graveyard. Even Kaisai, who's familiar with the battlefield, couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. This place was so empty before the battle started. Well, even if it looked like this, the actual damage done was already minimal. The Norwegians ended up surrendering so quickly after all. In truth, the wreckage here belongs to the Norwegian forces that refused to surrender. The Angel Force that made up the majority of the Norwegian noble army surrendered themselves before their army fell into disarray, so they managed to avoid unnecessary damage. But the question still remains. Where's the Empress? It's a shame that we couldn't catch her while she was transitioning the orbit. We can't even confirm that she's actually here too. Valentina's worry is valid. In the end, they only came here trusting in Dairose's prediction. It's not unlikely that she might be wrong too. It hasn't been long since the battle ended. The wreckage here still retains residual heat, so our heat sensor wouldn't be of help. Moreover, with this much debris, our radar is probably useless too, Valentina said in a sarcastic tone. We finally escaped the storm below, but our situation hasn't changed at all, huh? Seriously, what a pain, isn't it? Anyway, we have no other clue to go on. For the time being, let's search through this place. Certainly, the environment made it difficult for them to perform the search, and the situation wouldn't improve even if they keep complaining, but here they have Kaisai, a human radar, with them. It's probably better than nothing. Come to think of it, the Zenith that attacked us earlier was completely translucent, isn't it? Do you think the Empress's striker also has that kind of camouflage installed? Also, do you think that the Empress still has that kind of escort hiding with her? Many strikers are equipped with active stealth devices to deceive radar, or mass and heat sensors, but perfect optical camouflage is simply not cost-effective for conventional weapons, so the tech is not that widespread. Its drawback is that even while the stealth system is completely activated, if the striker raises the engine to combat output, the heat from that would be detectable by a heat sensor. With a striker's size, you normally wouldn't have to be wary of invisible strikers, but if we cannot use our eyes, then we will have no choice but to rely on Kaisai's senses. Please keep that in mind. Even I didn't notice the earlier guy after all. The already faint presence of the clones coupled with the optical camouflage was a troublesome combo even for Kaisai. Since it already happened once, there's no guarantee that it won't happen again. Kaisai knitted his brows as his gaze wandered around. Since we just saw the 5th unit of the new 4 Heavenly, it wouldn't be strange if the 6th showed up now. Well, don't worry too much about it. Even though their strikers were constructed with multiple productions in mind, those things are ultra-high performance machines. Even a big empire like Nord cannot produce that many of such a thing. Well, it doesn't mean that we should let our guard down though. Dairose added and paused. She gazed down and searched her memory before raising her head again as though she remembered something. The Empress's striker, Lagrum, doesn't have optical camouflage. It's the Empress's personal striker after all. If she installed such a cowardly device to hide in battle, then she would lose the respect of her subjects. She certainly is fond of that kind of equipment, but well, she still has her reputation to consider. I see, that's great to hear. Schleer caressed her modest chest in relief. After all, if she's completely hidden by the optical camouflage, then it would be harder for them to find her. Very well. Shall we start with this area? If possible, I want us to split up and search, but considering the possibility that we might get ambushed, it would be better for us to avoid being alone. It will lower our efficiency, but it's probably better if the 3 of us stick together. The 3 nodded at Valentina's words and moved out. CH-286, trap. Finally, some clues. It wasn't until 10 minutes after they began their search that they found the trace of propellant from the Empress's striker. It might look like they have found their first clue relatively early, but in the vacuum of space, this residue gas disperses to the extent that they turn unobservable very fast. For those who are actively looking for it, the tension made 10 minutes feel like an hour. Judging from the rate of dispersion, it probably wasn't too long ago that she passed through here. Looking at the calculated data from the spectral sensor, Valentina stroked her chin. It was originally a device for checking the composition of the atmosphere, but it can be used here as well. That said, they cannot analyze it very thoroughly. They cannot be sure whether it was from a striker or other small vessel. However, since the rescue team had already withdrawn from this sector, the fact that they found such newly emitted gas made it safe for them to assume that it came from the Empress. For the time being, shall we follow the trail? Even while they are talking, the residue gas would continue to disperse. They cannot afford to waste time now. Since they finally detected some clue, they have to make full use of it. Let's proceed with caution. It's going well so far, but that woman is most certainly not incompetent. If we show an opening, she might ambush us. There is no way an incompetent woman would be able to outsmart her many sisters and reach the throne of Nord. The advantage they gained over her so far was due to how they exploited the Empress's overconfidence and lack of information. At this stage, expecting the Empress to be careless would be idiotic. On the contrary, if they grow complacent, it's very possible that the Empress might turn the table on them. Of course. Schlier nodded and slightly increased her speed. There, Miss Tiltwine accelerated forward, leaving a trail of jet flame behind while Kaisai followed after her. The group proceeded cautiously through the dark space. Traces of the propellant gas weaved through the debris, such as the wreckage of a destroyer and a huge chunk of iron that seems to be a part of a battleship's main turret. It's a dangerous path that a single mistake would make them collide with these debris. This is ... Isn't it look like she's purposefully using a dangerous route? Kaisai groaned while avoiding the floating debris of various sizes. There were small ones such as chairs and beds to very small ones like hairbrushes and pens. The big ones aside, the small ones cannot be avoided, so they often collide with the armor plate, making loud sounds on impact. They probably got blown out from the destroyed ships. A ship that still has a functioning engine would be able to deploy an air shield to maintain the atmosphere inside, even in the case where there's a hole in its outer shell, but when the engine stopped working, that function would be lost. She probably knew that we were chasing after her. Do you think she's trying to lose us? True. If she wants to scavenge a ride booster, then she would be looking for a ship that sustained light damage. After all, if her goal was to scavenge, then she doesn't need to enter a place with so much debris like this. After all, she would be able to find what she's looking for much faster if she utilized her radar and heat sensor from a good vantage point. That is possible, but ... Is that truly all? It's strange, but I have a bad feeling about this. It was when Diarose muttered that a thin wire caught the Miss Tiltwine's shoulder. At that moment, the wreckage of a destroyer that was drifting nearby exploded. Scattered pieces of armor plate rained down on them like shrapnels. You are. Even while she was screaming in surprise, Schlier was quick to react. She moves in front of the Excalibur that's flying behind and shields Kaisai. Several armor pieces collided into the back of Miss Tiltwine, and part of her thruster was damaged, leaking the propellant inside. Are you okay? Kaisai raised his voice in panic at the loud clashing sound. In space, these kinds of debris can travel even faster than a bullet. Even a striker won't come out unscathed with a direct hit. Miss Tiltwine is not that fragile, you know. Kaisai was relieved hearing Schlier's smug expression. However, there are explosions occurring all over the place, scattering large debris around them. At this rate, they might suffer some bad hits. Let's take cover over there. Valentina pointed at a floating large armor plate that seemed to come from a battleship with an alarmed voice. It's big enough for all three of their strikers to hide behind. That's too convenient. If it's a battleship's armor plate, then it won't budge even against the debris. A perfect cover for them. With Kaisai in her arms, Schlier used her remaining thrusters to propel them toward the armor plate. Valentina follows behind them while watching their backs. Oh, Oi, stop. If we get careless then. In a clearly panicked tone, Dia-Rose raised her voice, but it was already too late. The moment Kaisai and the others went behind the armor plate, the bomb planted there exploded. The bomb itself was an improvised one made from a battleship's turret's round. Crimson flame burst and covered the whole area. CH-287. Even if it's cowardly. Seeing the huge ball of fire flared up in the darkness of space, the Empress showed a satisfied smile. Seriously, they gave me such a hard time. After exiting the atmosphere, the Empress activated her stealth device and spent most of her remaining fuel on a forced march to reach this area filled with dark impromptu space reefs before Kaisai's group. Using the head start she earned using her precious fuel, she had set up traps all over the area. Naturally, she also had an option to quickly find a ride booster and get out of here, but she knows that she won't have a future left if she gets captured mid-escape. It's easy to assume that the Kalantians would send their most elite pursuers after her, so, rather than letting them catch her while she was escaping, she decided to turn the table on them here and escape in peace. That was 46 centimeters high explosive round at point blank. Even if they are piloting Zeniths, they shouldn't get away unscathed. The traps were made using explosives and ammunition she scavenged from the wreckage. It was disgraceful, but the traps she laid should be powerful enough to take down her opponents. Even a heavily armored machine should be rendered immobile with this. Still, it's better to confirm the result with my own eyes. The Empress knew that she would be the most vulnerable the moment she thinks that she got them. Because of that, she made sure to load the Mega Blaster rifle in her hand before leaping out from the cover of a cruiser's wreckage. If it's from that direction, then the one that got triggered must have been number 3. In that case, she had set up many traps besides the one that got triggered earlier. Knowing that, Empress makes her way through the debris while being careful not to get herself caught in her own traps. However, when she was flying past a large chunk of iron, the lock-on warning sound suddenly resounded inside her cockpit. The Empress immediately pulled back the control stick and performed an evasive maneuver, and after a moment of delay, a thick streak of light hit the surface of the iron chunk. TSK missed her. That voice, Dia-Rose? The voice she heard over the com was a familiar one. No matter how cold-hearted the Empress is, there's no way that she would mistake the voice of her own daughter. Indeed, a pure white striker, Excalibur, jumped out from the shadow of the debris. The head and various other parts were completely different, but from the shape of its chest armor, the Empress could tell at a glance that it was a modified version of the Xantis. Currently, Excalibur is being piloted by Dia-Rose. Kaisai is resting his exhausted body in the front seat of the cockpit since he had fainted from the impact of the explosion. It's a little unexpected, but I will have you die here. For the sake of Schleer and Valentina, who died protecting us. I'm still alive, okay? ALIVE. Stop spouting nonsense and fight her seriously. Retorts came flying immediately after. It appears that both Schleer and Valentina are fine. However, they cannot participate in the battle. When the trap was triggered, the 2 plus Dia-Rose in the cockpit shielded Kaisai. It was thanks to their effort that their Excalibur was almost unscathed. Their 2 strikers, on the other hand, suffered fatal damage and are mostly destroyed by the explosion. This is especially true for Schleer's Mistiltwine, as it took the brunt of the explosion and is already beyond repair. With that being the case, Dia-Rose has no choice but to work hard and take down the Empress by herself. HMPH, so you're my only opponent, Then there's no problem. I will embed it into your brain that you are nothing more than a downgraded copy of me. The Empress fearlessly smiled and pointed the muzzle of her Mega Blaster rifle at their Excalibur. She hasn't been on the battlefield for a long time, but she had never missed her combat training, which is mandatory for vulnerability. Because of that, she doesn't even entertain the idea that she would lose to Dia-Rose, who's more specialized in commanding an army. HMPH, there's no way a weakling who relies on cowardly traps like you to win against me. Dodging the rapid-firing beams with a low-powered thrust, Dia-Rose replied with provocation. However, the Empress's accuracy was much better than she had expected, so cold sweat started forming on her cheeks. A momentary opening could spell her death. My subordinates are not here. There's no need to worry about reputation no matter what I do anyway. Naturally, setting such booby traps to ambush her enemy is not something that her subordinates would look kindly upon. As a royal, being labeled as a coward would be fatal. However, she's freed from such restraints right now. What? So, in other words, you are saying that you are no match for me without relying on those traps. Mother, it seems your age has finally gotten to you, huh? I don't want someone who just showed the entire army how she was so happy to be whipped by a man to tell me that. The Empress yelled. Perhaps when it comes to throwing away their pride, Dia-Rose is much better than her. I will kill you here. You can regret ever rebelling against me after you die. CH 288. Mother, Daughters Showdown 1. The Empress's personal striker, Lagrum, is a terribly large machine. Despite the fact that strikers are usually around 12 meters tall, Lagrum's gigantic frame was over 15 meters. From Dia-Rose's perspective, fighting it with Excalibur was like fighting a towering giant. TSK. While daunting the shots from the Empress's Mega Blaster rifle, Dia-Rose returned fire. A high-powered beam cuts through the darkness of space, but it only disappears into emptiness even without the Lagrum taking an evasive maneuver. She missed by a lot that it was like wasn't even locked on her target before firing. That was a pretty clumsy shot, huh? Seriously? It made me doubt if you truly came out from my womb. Yug. That was clearly a provocation, but it was plenty effective against Dia-Rose. She almost yelled back in anger, but she saw Kaisai, who has yet to regain consciousness, lying limp in his seat. Right now I'm the only one who can protect him. Thinking so, the blood that rushed to her head began to cool down and she started slowing her breathing. There's no place for skill when you fire using the auto-targeting system in the first place. You are probably just choosing something to deceive the fire control radar, right? Tapping the console, Dia-Rose tweaked the shooting-related settings. To be specific, she switched from the radar-assisted system to the laser targeting system. With this, her overall accuracy will be slightly lowered, but her aim should not be interfered with as easily as before. When she pulled the trigger, the beam flew right to the place she pointed it to, and there, Lagrum had to avoid it while looking slightly flustered. As I thought, employing such a dirty trick. Aren't you no shame as an empress? I don't want to hear anything about shame from an embarrassment like you. Compared to showing that disgraceful footage to the whole army, this is nothing. The Empress almost said that out loud. A kettle calling a pot black, huh? Even rotten as you are still my blood, so please, have some restraints. I'm dying from second-hand embarrassment over here. What did you say? The Empress reacted furiously to Schleer and Valentina's comments, while Dia-Rose only showed a bitter smile on her face. Although they managed to damage the Empress's morale, Dia-Rose still has to defeat the Empress alone. Dia-Rose thought as she hid from a beam behind the debris. It would be best to avoid getting into melee range. Huh? That side would have the advantage on that after all. Lagrum was not designed to be that big just to look imposing alone. Naturally, it also has the power output to match its gigantic frame. Moreover, Dia-Rose wasn't confident enough that she can overcome that power gap with her technique alone. Then what should I do? The moment she started pondering her plans, Dia-Rose pulled out the spare magazine from the anti-ship grenade launcher mounted on the leg. It's a little too big to hold with one hand. She shoved it into a gap between debris. You won't get away from me. Just then, Lagrum circled around and fired a beam at her. She immediately kicked off the debris and escaped from the line of fire. Are you only good at running away? The Empress sneered and provoked her. Such a cheap provocation. Dia-Rose grinned and retorted, if you don't want to have a shootout with me, then shall we have a sword fight then? With a shout, the Empress drew her sword. It's a one-handed sword, but as though to compensate for the striker's large frame, the blade was as long as Schleer's Zweihander. The moment she finished unsheathing, the Empress immediately made the Lagrum lunge at Dia-Rose with a thrust. The jet flame from the thrusters was so huge that one can see the ridiculous amount of thrust they are producing. With such a sudden acceleration, the sluggish impression of the giant striker disappeared. What sword fight? With a groan, Diarose tried to stop the Empress with her Mega Blaster rifle, but she skillfully evaded the beams without stopping her charge. Realizing that it's useless, Diarose throws away the rifle and pulls out the photon saber with her left hand. With the earlier attack from the clone, the right arm was already immobile, so she had no choice but to fight with one arm. Diarose managed to catch the Empress's downward swing with her photon saber. The beam blade bent and was broken by the repulsive force from the Empress's blade. Unable to maintain the blade, the cylindrical grip short-circuited, and after a small explosion, the beam blade disappeared altogether. You've got to be kidding me. The photon saber was the latest model from Kawashima Ironwork. It has enough performance to compete with the Four Heavenlies equipment and Royal Family Zeniths. Seeing it destroyed in a single hit was unbelievable. While stabilizing the striker with the thrusters, Diarose threw away the now useless grip and pulled out another photon saber. Ha 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 ha, shame on you. The Empress charges at her again while laughing out loud. Seeing that, cold sweat began to drip down Diarose's forehead. Story of an Ace Pilot 289-300 ch 289. Mother-daughter showdown 2. When one side can destroy your weapon with a single blow, there's no way you can fight equally in melee. Thinking so, Diarose immediately reversed her striker and sped away at full speed. Despite the fact that she doesn't want to place an extra burden on Kaisai's unconscious body, she needs to get away with all her might. Ha 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 ha. That's what I wanted to see. On the other hand, the Empress, who had been on the receiving end of insults and provocation, enthusiastically chased after the Excalibur, while laughing like a madman. Due to the Lagrum's monstrous acceleration, the distance between the two that Diarose went to great length to widen is steadily getting smaller and smaller. That's not even on the level of scary anymore, right? Even there, Excalibur, which is equipped with the Zenith's heavy armor, won't be able to endure a direct hit from the Empress's blade. Rather than a sword, the thing felt more like a reaper scythe. With that image in mind, blood drained from Diarose's face. Don't worry, I changed my mind. I won't kill you here. I won't be satisfied unless I bring you back alive and have you tortured and put to the guillotine in front of me. The Empress swings her sword while shouting so. Even though she avoided the slash, Diarose was shaken. Knowing the Empress, that was no threat. She's fully intending to torture her and execute her with a guillotine. It was quite a shock for Diarose that her own mother is willing to go so far. Of course, she understands that it is not unwarranted because of her betrayal, but there's still a conflict between her rational and emotional sides. She couldn't help but wonder why the Empress can't reel her usual sadism back a little bit here. The man in that video ... that must be your lover, right? I will catch and do him right in front of you. Look forward to the show. I knew you would say that, you pervert. However, her own indignation was blown away by the Empress's following words. Instead, what sprang up inside her was the will to fight to protect her man. Realizing that, Diarose smiles at herself, wondering if this is her womanly instinct. In any case, right now she needs to defeat this woman somehow. That's impossible in a straightforward fight. After all, the difference in specs is too much for her skills to overcome. On top of that, Kaisai, who's physically weak, is still lying unconscious with her in the cockpit, so she can't perform unreasonable maneuvers that would affect his body. No easy way out. But I have no intention of losing to anyone other than Master. She strongly gripped the control stick tightly while enduring the onslaught of attacks from there. Lagrum. Her technique is both sharp and fast, and as to be expected, she doesn't even show a small opening like a big swing that can easily be exploited. When she avoided another horizontal swing, Diarose fired her wire gun at nearby debris. The moment the anchor was in place, she reeled herself toward it to take a distance away from there. Lagrum. Seriously, this is annoying. It would be better if you just give up. You have no advantage over me whatsoever. You must have realized that already, that you have no chance of winning from the start. While shouting whatever she wants, the Empress continued to chase after their Excalibur. In the end, the difference in their speed was apparent and the Empress caught up in an instant. Again, Diarose used the wire gun to evade the approaching giant sword. Take this, Take this. Lagrum's speed is certainly terrifying, but since it's a large striker, its movement is linear, so it can't accurately follow the tricky movements she performs using the wire gun. TSK, realizing her sword won't be enough alone, the Empress immediately switched her tactics. She pressed the button on the control stick and fired a large amount of high-mobility missiles from the back-mounted missile container. You're using missiles in a place filled with debris like this? Seeing the Empress launch the missiles, Diarose quickly turns her strikers and takes cover behind the debris. Nearly half the missiles got caught on the floating wreckage and exploded on the steel plate, while smaller debris was blasted away by the explosions and began to spin erratically. The remaining missiles were then intercepted by the anti-missile laser turrets mounted on the shoulders of Excalibur. With every invisible low-powered laser fired, a small warhead got burned and exploded before impact. In a blink of an eye, the number of missiles was sharply cut down. The missiles were just distractions, you know. However, the Empress already predicted that result. Before Diarose realized it, she circled around to the opposite side and charged at her with a Mega Blaster rifle. It's a pincer attack. The missiles were mostly shot down by the laser turrets, but as expected, not all of them could be cleaned up, and while she's occupied with that, Diarose would be too late to react to the Empress's charge. I thought you would do that. However, Diarose's face shows no sign of impatience. On the contrary, she pulled out the 8.5 MW blaster rifle from the back with a grin. CH-290. Mother-daughter showdown 3. There, Lagrum, and the missiles are approaching her at the same time. If Diarose doesn't deal with both, then she will lose. However, she turned her back on the Empress and pointed her rifle at the missiles before switching on the laser turrets. She also changed the firing mode to semi-automatic and began shooting down the missiles. With the laser turrets and her rifle, all missiles were accurately shot down. Since these missiles were small in size and could only move monotonously, it was quite easy for her to intercept all of them. Kyukaku, you panicked, huh? Still, the missiles were not Diarose's only imminent threat. From behind her, there, Lagrum, rushed at her like a bullet. Its charge was accompanied by several shots from its Mega Blaster rifle. Diarose somehow avoids them with an evasive maneuver without turning around. The monitor showed a crimson beam flying past her. It was scary enough to be shot at from the front, but being fired at from behind is just as terrifying. Despite the shiver running down her spine, Diarose didn't flinch. There, still facing the other way, Diarose sticks the rifle behind her and starts firing. Naturally, the muzzle was nowhere near there. Lagrum. After all, the only one who's capable of shooting without looking is Kaisai. Fool. The Empress sneered at that seemingly futile resistance, but suddenly an explosion occurred from the direction of nearby debris. The beam Diarose fired had hit the spare ammunition she tucked away earlier, causing a big explosion. The explosive power of 4 anti-ship missiles was no joke. The metallic debris burst from the blast and the shrapnel attacked the Lagrum at bullet-like speed. Yes, Diarose had lured the Empress to this exact position. Lagrum was hit by a swarm of shrapnels from the side and got blown away. With each metallic shrapnel hitting its armor, a violent spark is sent flying. It was not enough to deal a fatal blow to it, but the attack did manage to stop its movement for a moment. It's over. With the left hand firmly holding the rifle, Diarose charged full speed at Lagrum, with the bayonet glinting in the faint light of Gaily. What? There, Excalibur performed a bayonet charge at their Lagrum. The Empress couldn't evade it as she just got blown away by the explosion. The sharp tip of the bayonet was shoved at their Lagrum's abdomen. The violent impact shook both strikers, and Kaisai and Diarose almost got blown off their seats. However, the bayonet itself couldn't withstand the charge and shattered into pieces without penetrating the Lagrum's armor. There, Excalibur slammed into the Lagrum, and the two strikers violently wrestled. Yawawawa, damn you! That scared me. The Empress angrily shouted. Lagrum is the bigger striker, so the impact from the collision was less for her. She grabbed the Excalibur by the shoulders and yanked it away. Wah! The physical difference between the two was like an adult and a child. There, Excalibur was thrown away like an oversized toy, and the impact also made it drop its rifle. This is the end. The Empress points her Mega Blaster rifle at Excalibur. Diarose hurriedly tried to accelerate away, but it was too late. The Empress's finger was already on the trigger. Diarose grasped, but even though she didn't do anything, there, Excalibur's left hand suddenly unsheathed a photon saber from its chest mount. The beam blade sharply repels the high-powered beam. That unexpected movement froze the Empress for a moment. Since the beam was flying straight back at her, she had no time to avoid it. The bullet of light landed on Lagrum's shoulder and blew away its armor plate. Gwah! The Empress groaned while trying to prevent her striker from spinning out of control. There! Excalibur fired up its thrusters and rushed in for an attack. This is the end. The one who shouted that this time was Kaisai. The impact from the earlier bayonet charge shook him awake. He landed a powerful roundhouse kick on the head of Lagrum. Although the Empress's personal striker boasted its insane robustness, its neck was still relatively fragile. With a full-powered kick from a zenith, the head was sent flying clean off. Gah! The Empress roared in anger, but it was too late. The saber's blade pierced into Lagrum's belly where it got stabbed by the bayonet earlier. The half-penetrated armor couldn't withstand the second attack, and the beam blade managed to pierce its engine. As though its earlier rampage was a lie, Lagrum lost all of its power. However, not yet. This cannot be the end for me. The Empress shouted and pulled the lever under her seat with all her might. The back armor of Lagrum was blown off by explosive bolts, and something was ejected from within. It's an escape pod. What? Diarose let out a bewildered voice. Because most strikers were designed to be compact in size, they usually do not come with such emergency escape devices. However, Lagrum is no standard striker. There was enough room on it to house such a mechanism. The escape pod activated the engine on its back and accelerated away with ferocious momentum. It appears that she's trying to get away from this place. She doesn't know when to quit. Kaisai roared and immediately gave chase. CH-291. The woman who doesn't know when to quit, to chase after the Empress who's running away in her escape pod. Kaisai accelerated there. Excalibur. The pod is rather small for a spacecraft. It's even smaller than a passenger car. Despite its extremely short cruising range, it can make sharp turns at high speed, so losing sight of it for even a moment can let the Empress safely get away from them. Argh, can't she just give up already? Diarose spits out her indignation and turns her gaze to Kaisai in the front seat. Her next words came out in a very worried tone. Is your body okay? Should we go to the medics instead of chasing her? Up until now, they were in a situation where they couldn't escape, so she was prioritizing the Empress. However, now that the Empress is escaping via an unarmed escape pod, they have leeway to withdraw. Since Kaisai fainted earlier, Diarose is very worried about his well-being. It's okay. My head is ringing a bit, but we can't let the Empress get away. Diarose just went out of your way to corner her, right? Diarose groaned with her mouth quivering. Kaisai's voice didn't change much from usual, but she can't even see his complexion from the back seat. It's certainly possible that he's just toughing it up. However, Kaisai's argument is also valid. Since they managed to corner the Empress so far, it would be a waste not to capture her using this chance. In the end, Diarose agreed to continue the pursuit. Kaisai regained consciousness. Is he safe? Schlier's voice came through the com. There, Miss Tiltwine was damaged beyond repair, so she had no way to confirm the situation herself. No problems over here. My bad, I made you worried. The Empress is on the run on an escape pod. I'm chasing after her. Understood. But please don't push yourself. Your body is unlike ours, and the Empress is certainly a tricky opponent. I wouldn't know what to do if something happened to you. I know. Schlier fell silent for a moment at his simple reply. She wasn't convinced whether he truly understands why she was so worried, but she has no choice but to stop herself for now. Miss Tiltwine is completely wrecked, but there, Colbrand should be able to move after some emergency repairs. We will join you once we fix it up, so please don't be reckless. Yes. The repair won't take too long, so please don't push yourself too much. my love. Yeah, yeah. With both Schleer and Valentina repeating the same thing, Kaisai can't help but let out a wry smile. However, even while they were talking, the Empress is speeding away in her escape pod. Because of its small size, it can soar through the gap between the debris that normal strikers cannot pass through. Searching blindly for that thing in space would be difficult. Given its size, that pod shouldn't have a phased transition turbine installed, so FTL or sunlight speed should be impossible. If she wants to escape this system, she will have to find another vessel. With the control back to Kaisai, Diarose now has time to think. She folded her arms while her eyes keep track of the thruster flame from the escape pod in the distance. If she searches the storage decks of these wreckages, then she should be able to find a couple strikers that are still intact. If she wants to get away, then she has no other way. Conversely, we can shoot that thing down and secure her before she gets on a new striker. Kaisai glanced at the remaining ammunition. The only firearm he has left available is the anti-ship grenade launcher. He has no way to recover the Mega Blaster rifle and the blaster rifle that got lost among the debris. The escape pod is rather small as a target, but with Kaisai's skill, then even the grenade launcher with a slower projectile should be able to hit it. But considering its destructive power, the Empress would definitely die in the blast. Of course, the situation is as it is. Considering the worst-case scenario, it might be necessary for him to give up his no-killing rule. With a grim look on his face, Kaisai placed his finger on the trigger. No, wait, don't be so hasty. That woman has never engaged directly with Master before. She probably doesn't know about your sixth sense. If we let her think that she managed to get away and ambush her, then we should be able to take her alive. Diarose gently taps Kaisai's shoulder. He hesitated for a moment before letting go of the trigger. Just keep watch. She will try something soon. Even that woman wouldn't think that she would be able to escape using that escape pod forever. Kaisai silently nodded and followed the escape pod with his eyes. Using the debris as cover, the pod smoothly and quickly hid in the wreckage of a half-destroyed battleship. Follow her. When he suddenly accelerates toward the Empress, the pod pops out from its cover and begins to fly away. That's autopilot. However, Kaisai's eyes cannot be deceived. After glancing at the escape pod which was speeding away in the distance, Kaisai turned his gaze back to the battleship wreckage. Looks like she's over there. As expected. It appears that the Empress used the pod as a decoy to earn time for her to procure a striker. The pod itself is covered in armor plates, so you usually cannot tell if it's manned or not. The decoy should be plenty effective against normal pilots. Let's go. This time we're going to get her for sure. With a nod, Kaisai accelerated their Excalibur toward the wrecked battleship. CH-292 secured. Abandoning the escape pod, the Empress escaped to the wreckage of a battleship. The ship is a Grand Tour-class battleship usually employed by the nobles. Its thick triple-barreled main turrets are silently aiming upward. They looked like they were ready to fire at any moment, but there were a number of large holes on the ship's side. It probably got hit by multiple anti-ship missiles. If it's this class, then we should circle around to the stern. Following Diarose's guidance, their Excalibur was approaching the ship's stern. None of the turrets tracked its movement. It did not even twitch. No laser or radar. This wreckage of a ship had already lost all its function as a warship. We can access the storage deck from that gate. The other side is on foot, so she would have to get here using a different route. Still, since our destination is the same, it would be to our advantage to use the shortest route. I see. So the layout of battleships is mostly the same for most countries. With a nod, Kaisai cautiously approached the battleship. He got blown away by a booby trap earlier, so he couldn't deny the possibility that the Empress might set something up here as well. The gate Diarose guided him to was the gate to the ship's landing deck. Its armored shutter is shut tight, and judging from the heat sensor, it's impossible to open it normally since the power has been cut. Seems like we have to force our way in. Kaisai hesitated for a moment, then pointed his grenade launcher at the gate. He flicked the trigger on the control stick and the missiles electromagnetically accelerated toward the gate, and not just one. He fired all his remaining missiles at it. The moment the first missile landed, a large explosion occurred. However, The shutter was heavily armored. A single shot only managed to distort its frame, but it cannot withstand multiple consecutive shots. The moment the fourth missile landed, the shutter turned into pieces of scrap metal. "Let's go." Throwing away the grenade launcher, which had run out of bullets, Kaisai advanced forward. There is still one spare magazine left, but a grenade launcher is too difficult to handle in tight spaces, so he opted for the photon saber instead. Cautiously, they entered the ship through the broken shutter. After passing through a short passageway, they arrived at the storage deck. The emergency lights installed evenly on the ceiling and the floor are illuminating the place with faint red glows. The visibility is a bit poor, but it's still enough to see the inside of the deck. Striker ... There, inside the mostly empty storage deck, a mostly intact Jetta was left at the deck's corner, perhaps because it's a spare machine. "Alright, let's get rid of that." Kaisai nodded and approached the Jetta, with a photon saber in his left hand. However, before Kaisai swung down the green beam blade at their Jetta, the Crimson Striker's trinocular camera suddenly flashed and came to life. "You fell for it." The Empress, who arrived at the storage deck a little earlier before them, activated the Jetta. The Crimson Striker pulled out a photon saber from its back and attempted to swing it at their Excalibur. "You're the one who fell for it." However, with Kaisai's ability to read presence, there's no way that he wouldn't notice such an ambush. He stepped to the side and kicked the Jetta in the back. Gua, although damaged, their Excalibur is still a Zenith type. Oh, its physical strength is incomparable to a mass-produced striker like a Jetta. The Empress let out a miserable scream as she was sent flying and slammed into the wall with tremendous force. After that, Kaisai easily stabbed his photon saber at its abdomen from behind. "Master." However, they didn't expect the Empress, who put up so much resistance so far, to yield so easily. Kaisai opened the cockpit hatch at the moment Diarose yelled out. Diarose kicked her seat and jumped out of the Excalibur. The artificial gravity inside the ship was already broken, so there was no need to worry about the height. Right after, Kaisai threw Diarose his favorite electric whip at her. "Thanks." Without turning around, Diarose deftly caught the whip. As she had expected, the Empress blew the cockpit hatch open with explosive bolts and tried to escape in a hurry. "It's time for payback, mother." With no hesitation, Diarose brandished her whip at her mother. The Empress couldn't dodge that because she just leapt out of the Jetta. The whip hit her shoulder and a violent electric discharge assaulted the Empress's body. "So Volds do have concept of payback too, huh?" While watching that unfold from the cockpit of Excalibur, Kaisai quietly whispered to himself. CH 293. Betrayal. 10 minutes later, the Empress was tied up and hung in midair. She struggled to get free at first, but Diarose promptly beat her up, and she now looked so miserable that no one would believe that she was the ruler of a country. "Stop, forgive me." "Not the guillotine." While curling up like a caterpillar, the half-crying Empress shouted. Looking at her, Kaisai's gaze turned into a complicated one. "You know what? Why did we have this kind of rope in the cockpit?" As Kaisai said, the Empress was roped up with straw ropes. For some reason, it kind of gives the scene an obscene atmosphere. That said, this is Diarose's handiwork, so it is probably something she took from her hobby collection tucked inside her seat's storage compartment. I thought that I might get in the mood during mission. Face palming, Kaisai fell silent. With a slight blush, Diarose also averts her eyes away. "Don't mess with me. You tied me up and just started flirting in front of me." Unforgivable. Diarose wordlessly struck the Empress's behind with her whip. She let out an exaggerated scream, but the Empress would not back down because due to a punishment of this degree. "That man is your lover, right? Damn it. While I have to sleep alone every night, you're bringing your man to the battlefield?" "She still sleeps alone even with that many daughters, huh?" "Mother and father have not been on good terms for the past 10 years. They are practically on the brink of divorce actually," Diarose tells Kaisai in a small voice, but the Empress's face turned bright red. Shut up. Arg. You're going to execute me anyway, right? At least give me a night with that man. I don't want to die feeling miserable like this." "Hey, Stop embarrassing yourself. It's not that it will be effective, but at least just beg for your life. Abababab. Diarose switched her whip to electrocute mode, as it was already coiled around the Empress's neck. Her eyes rolled back and she fainted. Now then, all that left is to hand this woman to the main force. With a deep sigh of relief, Diarose turned her gaze to Kaisai. Perhaps because of the long battle and the relief that they finally managed to capture the Empress, she clearly looked exhausted. Yeah, we can't fit 3 people inside, Excalibur. Most of our force should have already landed on the surface too. Let's have them send us a transport ship once the communication is restored. While the Noridian force is routed, the Kalanchian main force is still intact. When the broken communication and poor visibility from the storm get back to normal, there's no reason for them to lose. Their only worry right now is Tursus's group, who was left to deal with the clone soldiers. Right. Ha, so it's finally over. Ha. After taking a deep breath, Kaisai felt the exhaustion finally set in. They had been in combat for half a day straight and he had already hit his limit. Fufafu. However, Kaisai and Diarose had to brace themselves in a panic at the sudden laughter they heard. It was not the Empress's. After all, she's already unconscious. How wonderful. With this, we can finally advance our story to the next chapter. What followed was the peculiar footstep of magnet boots. The place is a vacuum, so naturally, the sound was coming from the com, so they have no idea where it originated from. Valentina. Diarose snarled. Beyond her line of sight was a tall woman illuminated by the dim red light. It's Valentina, who has a pistol in her right hand. So it's you after all, huh? Where's Schlier? I left her behind. She has no use left after the emergency repair after all. Don't worry, I didn't hurt her. I don't want my love to hate me after all. Fluttering her hair with her left hand, Valentina directed a lustrous sideways glance at Kaisai. He shut his mouth and took a step back. Your role is over now, Diarose. Now, hand over the Empress and my love. I will ask just in case. What are you planning to do after you get Master and Mother? If her goal was to get the Empress and hand her over to the main force herself to obtain credit, then there would be no need for her to demand Diarose to hand over Kaisai. It's clear that she has some sort of big plan in mind. Reorganize my force and return to Nord. I will use the Empress to gain control of the Empire's politics and military at the same time. Thanks to you capturing her alive, it looks like I will be able to smoothly install myself as the next Empress. I'm grateful, you know. And, what about me? Of course, you will become my husband. You will become the next Emperor of the Great Nord Empire. This shouldn't be a bad deal for my love, no? With a grin, Valentina revealed her plan. CH 294. Left out. Of course. You will become my husband. You will become the next Emperor of the Great Nord Empire. This shouldn't be a bad deal for my love, no? Hearing Valentina's intention, Kaisai took another step back with a bitter expression. Diarose had long pointed out the possibility of her betrayal, but it still gave him a shock when such a possibility turned into reality. I think I've already said no though. At that time I was simply a princess dead last in the succession line. But now it's different. If I use that woman over there, I can surely become the next Empress of Nord. Valentina turned her gaze back to Kais after she shifted it to the fainted Empress. Her gaze as she looked at the Empress was hard to believe that it was the kind of gaze a daughter would direct at her mother. He can feel something burning behind her eyes. My love, join me. Together we can create our ideal country. No. Kaisai's answer was straight and direct. Hearing that, Valentina looked like someone just dumped cold water on her head. Politics is not my thing. I will just drag you down, you know. Maybe so. Still, it is certain that he is not someone suited for the political world where deception and backstabbing are rampant. From the perspective of an experienced politician, Kaisai would be nothing but a greenhorn. Valentina understands that very well. No, but I'm not asking you to play politics. With your strength and beauty, you would be more than suitable to become a general. Kaisai may lack the ability as a commander, but even without such a thing, the Vold military can be led through charisma alone. Practical stuff can be left to the experts from the staff members. With that line of thinking, it's not impossible for him to lead an army. It's frustrating to deal with the likes of her, isn't it? Master, how about you just come out and say it? Facing Valentina, who was already drenched in a cold sweat, Dia said so with a terribly mean smile. Just say I'm already married to other women, so I can't be yours anymore. What? Valentina's shoulders jumped as though she was recoiled by the possibility that Dia's words could be true. However, before she could say anything more, Dia made her move. She walked up to Kaisai, crouched down, and kissed him on the forehead. Kaisai's face twitched for a moment. He doesn't mind the kiss, but he has to wonder what provoking Valentina would gain them at the moment. However, Dia urged him to return a kiss with her gaze. Giving up, he silently placed his lips on her forehead as well. What is? As expected, Valentina's face immediately paled. However, Dia did not stop there. Do you know? Terrans usually confirm their love for each other by kissing their partner on the lips. The moment she said that, she covered Kaisai's lips with her own. She didn't put her tongue in because she doesn't want to let herself go at the moment, but she was still being quite passionate. Awa, 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 awa. From red to blue, Valentina's complexion is alternating so fast between the two. It should be quite a traumatic sight for a pure maiden like her. Even so, her expression still contains strong emotions. After all, the person she loves is being tainted by her own older sister. It wouldn't be strange if she pounces at Dia right now. Seeing her sister's state, Dia let out a small smile. She parted her lips from Kaisai's and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. And that's how it is. While you were off plotting stuff by your lonesome, things have already progressed to the point of no return. NMGNFT, NNN. Valentina stumbled back, her face twitching. Dia's kiss aside, the fact that Kaisai returned her kiss has vanquished all uncertainties from her mind. Is it true? My love. Even so, it was human nature to not accept such a thing right away. With a trembling voice and tears in her eyes, she voiced that question to Kaisai. Yeah. How? Why? When? Valentina's shout was unusually loud for her normal disciplined self. After all, Dia had been their enemy until just a while ago. It's certainly strange for things to progress this far. That would be hard to say. Their relationship began due to Dia's aggressive nightly visits. But to say it out loud would be to say that he's that gullible as a man. Even if it's the truth, Kaisai is still reluctant to say it. Even though we were enemies, we shared a bond, you know. It's not unnatural for people to have great respect for their nemesis after all. What respect? You were so excited about losing, weren't you? Don't try to chalk it up now. Since it was true, Dia turned slightly bashful while Kaisai looked at her with an exasperated expression. Well, it's the truth. With her brain and willingness to do anything to win on top of her beauty, no man would be able to resist my charm. Probably. You don't have to praise me that much, you know. I mean, we are trying to show her up here, so I don't really mind if you keep going though. This woman. Just look at her face would make a 100-year love grow cold. What were you thinking, my love? Every man has their preferences, right? After mumbling such a half-baked excuse, Kaisai leaned close to Dia's ear. The height difference was usually too great for him to do that, but she's still hugging his shoulder, so it works out. I can see you provoking her, but what's the plan here? Valentina is just listening right now, but there's a good chance that she will attack them if they rile her up too much. In that case, repelling her would be difficult. Kaisai's physically weak, so he would be useless in hand-to-hand combat. Since Valentina has a good physique and a pistol in her hand, she has no reason to lose to them either. No problem. However, Dia returned a confident smile. She then turned her gaze to Valentina. She's my younger sister, you know. Blood is thicker than water. Do you understand now? Don't tell me. Valentina is also a pervert. Exactly. What exactly? Kaisai retorted in his mind. CH 295. Disposition. I don't want to believe it, but it seems to be true, huh? Valentina squeezed her voice out. Her expression looked extremely frustrated. Since they are whispering to each other, it must have seemed like they are on good terms with her. One more thing. It's no use clinging to some stupid hope that Master's body is still untainted, okay? Valentina's eyes balked while Kaisai choked on his saliva. Diarose just dropped a bomb. Not only that, but she also proceeds to lewdly stroke Kaisai's body with an obscene smile on her face. Valentina audibly gulped. It's only natural, right? When a young woman and a man fall in love, that should be a given. Weren't they calling you a late bloomer? As expected, even Diarose was affected by that remark, and she considered retaliating with her whip for a moment, but the fact still stands that Valentina has a gun. Carelessly putting up resistance here would be useless. She holds down her anger and continues taunting her younger sister with a relaxed expression. In a sense, this is her forte. Man, it was real wonderful, playing with his pure and beautiful body. I mean, when his white skin blushed red and his tender limbs in my arms. Valentina let out a strange moan as though she just imagined it happening right in front of her eyes. She was blushing and her body started to tremble. Her current attitude looks like that of Diarose when she's waiting in anticipation for a punishment. As he has nothing to do but act as a prop for Diarose, Kaisai can't help but think that these two really are sisters. He has no choice but to let his mind roam free, as he might get aroused by all Diarose's caresses otherwise. Do you know, Terran men have stronger sexual desire than Veld. Master is no exception. As cute as he is, he can turn into a beast. I really love it when he looks like he desires nothing but my body. Diarose's provocation was loud and clear. She normally spoke in a way that left herself open for verbal abuse, but she's the type that can switch things around too. On the other hand, Kaisai wanted to defend himself, but he couldn't afford to interfere with Diarose's plan. All he can do is stay silent. No. It's a lie. My love would never. It's all true. If you think I'm lying, then I don't mind demonstrating our love in front of you, though. How about it? Diarose pulled Kaisai close and performed an exaggerated gesture. Her fingers traced the zipper of her pilot suit. Hey. As expected, Kaisai objected that, but Diarose's lips forcibly blocked his before he could finish his protest. Seeing that, Valentina made a hoarse voice. Stop. You want us to stop? Kyuku. At Valentina's flustered protest, Diarose parted her lips from Kaisai and shrugged. How about you look at your face in the mirror first? Is that the face of someone who truly wants me to stop? What? Diarose's words must have been too unexpected for Valentina, as she hurriedly pulled out a hand mirror from her waist pouch. The face reflected in the mirror was so loosened like a dog in heat. Her eyes are moist and her mouth is loose enough for her drool to spill. Valentina was so shocked that she almost fainted. If they have gravity right now, she would have collapsed to the floor. Why? How? Why? Why do I look so excited? Valentina couldn't finish her sentence. After all, she noticed the wet sensation coming from below. She can no longer deceive herself. There's a saying on Terra, like mother like daughter. Apparently, a pervert's sister is also a pervert. Valentina. Pervert? Me? Valentina muttered with a dumbfounded look. She wanted to shout that it isn't true, but her body wouldn't allow it. Diarose grins and lets her tongue run along Kaisai's neck. Hearing Kaisai yelp made Valentina's body grow hotter. I think it's called NTR or something along that line. In short, you are the type that gets excited when you see a man you love being toyed with by another woman. Seriously? Do you really think you have the right to lecture me now? NTR. A bolt of lightning struck Valentina's mind when she heard that. Before her reason could deny it, her feelings have already accepted it as a fact. Certainly, she does feel bitterness as she looks at Kaisai being embraced by Diarose. However, at the same time, an overwhelmingly murky excitement continued to seep out no matter how much she tried to deny it. Put down your gun, Valentina, or do you still think that someone who's actually enjoying her beloved man being embraced by another woman can be an empress? Valentina couldn't help but freeze at Diarose's words. CH 296, Sisters Battle 1. Put down your gun, Valentina, or do you still think that someone who's actually enjoying her beloved man being embraced by another woman can be an empress? Hearing her sister's words, Valentina gritted her teeth. The fact that she was actually convinced for a moment greatly upset her. Should this fact become known to her subordinates and the commoners, it would not be strange if it would be used to justify treason. However, the position of an empress could not be given up so lightly. All right, let's do it like this then. I'm marrying my love with that collar around your neck, and you would have to follow my love to the empire anyway. It's been a long time since she last called Diorzanou. Rose leaked a wry smile. That's quite shrewd for her sister, she thought. However, without noticing what her sister was thinking, Valentina continued. If anything, we can marry him together. Even among the imperial family, there were many cases where sisters married the same man. No one will oppose such a thing. Our interest should align with this. In the first place, Valentina had no intention of killing Rose. The idea was simply to bring her back with Kaisai and tame her. However, when she discovered the possibility of NTR play, her plan was out of the window. Since the disposition that she didn't even realize existed herself was exposed, she needed to give her sister something to keep her mouth sealed. On top of that, with her fetish fulfilled and Rose's cooperation, she would get two birds with one stone. Your attitude completely changed, huh? Kaisai's face twitched. Even though she was treating Rose like an enemy until just a moment ago, she's now trying to persuade Rose into an agreement. Their positions are completely reversed. On the other hand, Valentina was emotionally overwhelmed so badly that the fact that she has a gun which gives her an absolute advantage vanished from her mind. It's not like that. We just captured Mother after all. I just don't want to fight my own family anymore. If those words are true, then you just realized your love for your sister at the worst time you know. No matter how he looks at it, Valentina simply became amicable after she became aware of her fetish. Kaisai looks at Valentina with clear disdain. She faltered back at his gaze, but Rose was eyeing her with envy. Anyway, there's absolutely no point for us to argue. You will join me, right? And you? No. With a grin, Rose shook her head. Master's wedding ceremony is already scheduled after all. He has no time to visit Nord right now. If it's a wedding ceremony, then wouldn't it be more natural for us to hold it back home? We are both members of the Noridian imperial family, right? The wedding is between Master and Schlier. Valentina was surprised since the name she didn't expect came up in the conversation, but she soon realized what her sister's words meant. She shuddered and glared at Rose in disbelief. You didn't. I did just that. Rose's reply was short, but her tone was filled with ridicule. When you weren't looking, my master has already gone all the way with that woman. To tell you the truth, she and I went to his room at the same time. You know, in a sense, she's even more similar to me than you are, dear sister. Kufu. It's a lie. That whiny crybaby did it. It's impossible. Tell me it's a lie. Valentina turns an imploring gaze to Kaisai. He seemed terribly bashful and hesitated for a while, but then, he nodded. Valentina's body shook as though an electric current ran through her spinal cord. Her white skin was blushing so much that it looked like her body could let out steam, and her expression was loosened. Hey, isn't she even a bigger pervert than me? I don't think you two are that different though. Valentina didn't seem to hear what they were saying, so Rose cleared her throat to bring Valentina's focus back to the conversation. How was it? The feeling when someone you considered inferior took your man away from you? In a sense, it might have felt even better than when I told you about me, right? My perverted little sister. You. Valentina's groaning sound has a strange mix of regret and pleasure. How dare she take my beloved person away? The fact that she couldn't even say that out loud already made it clear that it was too late for her. But I have more good news for a loser like you, Valentina. It's not just that woman and I who will be marrying Master, you know. Tursis, Eleanor, Nora, even Schlier's older sister and Saki. Yes. That's samurai too. To put it briefly, yes, it's everyone. Kakaku, it's exciting, isn't it? Who do you want to see Master with next? How about Nora and Saki together? You, a real princess robbed of her man by two former commoners. The humiliation will surely be as sweet as honey, you know. Wah, Wah! Valentina held her head while making strange noises as though her brain was being literally destroyed. CH 297, Sisters Battle 2. After being told the truth, Valentina remained silent for a while. It was as though her brain had short-circuited. If it was Schleer alone, then she can make peace with it, but she was even beaten by those who she thought had no chance from the beginning, so the shock was overwhelming. Did I overdo it? Dia-Rose muttered while gazing at her sister, whose complexion had become as pale as ash. There's nothing she can do since it's a fact, but she thought that there might be better ways to convey it. She does feel guilty, but when she saw a satisfied expression like that of a knight who had fulfilled her duty on Valentina's face, she can't help but think that her sister is really an irredeemable pervert. Valentina got a hold of herself when Dia-Rose crept close to take away her weapon, and she immediately pulled away. Oops, that was close. I really can't let my guard down around you, Anu. Wiping the drool from her lips, Valentina pointed her gun at them again. Dia-Rose bitterly clicked her tongue at her wasted chance. It's true that what you are trying to offer is attractive, Anu. Even so, I would be destroying myself if I accept it. I won't let temporary pleasure distract me from the big picture. So it was attractive to you? Kaisai recoiled. It's your fault, my love. With your charm you could seduce anyone. Rather, you should be taking responsibility for awakening something like this within me, right? That's a bit of a stretch, don't you think? Aware of that herself, Valentina averted her eyes for a moment. The nightly activities I can handle myself. Of course, I won't let some lowborn embrace my love, rest assured. You make sense, but it's not reassuring at all. Obviously. Dia-Rose nodded at Kaisai's words. So what are you going to do? It's obvious. I will neither give up on the throne nor my love. Even if I have to be forceful. It might be because of those thieving cats that my love still doesn't choose me, but you will surely come to understand me, my love. In other words, she's saying, I'm taking you by force. Realizing that, Kaisai's face twitched. And you too. If you choose to resist, then I will take you down here. If you do not wish to spend your time rotten away by yourself except for when I let you have my love, then I suggest you lay down your weapon. So you still want the NTR play? You really are greedy, you know. I'm surprised myself, but it seems that I'm actually quite greedy. Well, that's my mother after all. It can't be helped. Valentina glanced at the fainted Empress and shifted her eyes back to Dia-Rose. Now, this is your last chance. Will you join me or rot away in jail? Choose whatever you want. HMPH, no way around it, huh? With a light smile, Dia-Rose dropped the electric whip she was holding. She then turned her back on Kaisai and walked over to Valentina with her hands raised up. Don't think less of me. I don't want to get thrown in jail after all. A wise decision. Valentina grinned. However, at that moment, Dia-Rose smiled back and kicked off the floor with all her might. You think I will give up that easily, you idiot? Valentina was blown away by the powerful tackle. The place has no gravity, so once their magnetic shoes leave the floor, they won't stop until they collide with something. Gwa! Valentina screams as she slammed into the wall. The pistol fell out of her hand. Even like this, I'm still a woman. I won't simply sell out the man I love. Valentina is mostly better in terms of physique. Dia-Rose's chance of winning came from the element of surprise alone. Knowing that, she clenched her fists and continued her assault on Valentina. However, Valentina is not an opponent that can be easily beaten like that. Pressing the soles of her shoes against the wall, she countered Dia-Rose with a punch of her own. Dia-Rose, who received a punch to the face, spun around in the air with her nose bleeding and the back of her head slammed on the floor. Ouch! Tears float to the corners of her eyes, but she can't afford to focus on the pain right now. She dodged out of the way to avoid Valentina's follow-up kick and got up with a backflip. My beautiful face. Dia-Rose groaned while wiping the blood from her nose. On the other hand, Valentina arrogantly looked down on her. You enjoy pain, right? And shouldn't you be more grateful to have such a good sister like me? HMPH, I won't feel a thing when it's you. Dia-Rose shouted back with a fierce smile. After all, the only pain she enjoys receiving is from the man she loves. CH 298, Sisters Battle 3. While checking the condition of her magnet boots, Dia-Rose raised her fists up. Her surprise attack failed. She managed to get a tackle in, but Valentina is taking a fighting pose with a calm expression as though she did not receive any damage at all. Dia-Rose is quite tall herself, but Valentina is even taller than her. There's also the weight difference. Without weapons, this would create a big disadvantage for her. She started thinking of a way to come out on top of this fight, but even with her clear mind, she couldn't come up with a good way to beat her little sister. Still, with Kaisai behind her, yielding is not an option. What's wrong, Anu? Are you really all talk? Perhaps convinced of her victory, Valentina mockingly provoked Dia-Rose. Being robbed feels good, but robbing might not be that bad either, and I'm in the mood of trying that out right now. Valentina glanced at Kaisai with lustful eyes. His mouth was shut tight and he took a step back. It's pathetic, but it's true that he can do nothing to support Dia-Rose with his physique. The least he can do is to not burden her. A blatant provocation, huh? Even with her nose bleeding, Dia-Rose gave Valentina a contemptuous grin. If she just angrily charges in, then she will easily be beaten back. That's why she decided to take a careful approach. Are you so afraid of your big sister that you have to resort to cheap provocation? You are bigger than me, but you are howling like a sore loser, you know. I guess Mother was correct when she placed you dead last in the line of succession. What? In an instant, Valentina's calm expression vanished. She has prided herself as a warrior and a commander. Even so, she still has a complex about the fact that she was left out of the succession war. She had been acting like it didn't interest her, but now that she has the chance to take the throne, she's clinging to it. Dia-Rose evaluated her as much. Since you are trying to take a master with you with such an underhanded means, you must have some awareness of it yourself, right? If you truly are suitable for the throne, let alone master and you should have been able to persuade the generals to your side with your words alone. Dia grinned. In reality, her nose hurt like hell, but she cannot allow Valentina to see her weakness right now. You can't even prepare a legitimate justification to take the throne, and you lack the charisma to convince those around you that you are worthy of it. You are well aware of your shortcomings. That's why you chose to do it this way. No? Don't talk nonsense. And stop with your insults. Gritting her teeth, Valentina growled. She looks genuinely furious. She has a beautiful face and a good physique, so when her expression turned wrathful, the pressure she's emanating is nothing to scoff at. Oh, sorry, I must have hit the bullseye, huh? True, it's not ladylike to add salt to injury even by stating the facts. Forgive me, little sister. You're wrong. I'm wrong? You're angry now because I said something that you are already self-aware of, right? If I was just talking nonsense, then you would have laughed it off. Even if it's from my own older sister, there are things that you are allowed and not allowed to say. If you continue insulting me any more than this, then don't say that I didn't warn you, okay? See, Master? She knew she couldn't win with her words, so she's resorting to violence. Don't you understand that you are just admitting to everyone here that you are that kind of woman? Kuhahaha. Seeing Dia-Rose laughing at her, Valentina's reddish complexion turned even darker. Her fists are clenched tight and her legs are trembling. You will regret this. Certainly, Valentina didn't think that she would be able to win against her sister with her words alone. That's why she has no other option but to choose violence. She kicked off the floor and leapt at Dia-Rose. HMPH. Dia-Rose coldly looked at Valentina, who was rapidly rushing at her. Her provocation tactic worked out. However, that alone won't be enough. Dia-Rose managed to dodge the fist Valentina threw at her. At the same time, she slipped close to her and grabbed the collar of her pilot suit. Even with the weight difference, the zero gravity enabled her to easily throw Valentina, whose magnetic boots are no longer attached to the floor. Moreover, with blood rushing to Valentina's head, she couldn't even put up a proper resistance. With the momentum of her lunge, she was slammed to the wall. The back of her head hit the wall and she was out cold for a moment. Dia-Rose did not miss that chance. She planted her magnetic boots on the floor and threw a fist at Valentina with all her might. Dia-Rose is over 180 centimeters tall with a well-built physique. Her full power punch dug into Valentina's stomach. Moreover, with her back against the wall, The impact had nowhere to escape, so even Valentina felt that punch. This is the end. Dia-Rose tries to land a second punch, but Valentina manages to kick the wall and pounce on her. Dia-Rose, who was in the punching motion, couldn't avoid that blow. Just like that, Valentina coiled her body around her sisters and wrapped her arm around her neck while holding down her wrists. This judo-style submission technique restricted Dia-Rose's joints and choked her at the same time. In zero gravity, such techniques that require the user to be on the floor can be used even while she's standing. Dia-Rose, who had no martial arts training, had no means to escape from this hold. She's resisting, but since her artery was constricted, she wouldn't last long. Soon, she passed out from the lack of oxygen. After making sure that her sister is completely out of commission, Valentina released her arms. But she can't perform any sudden moves now due to the damage she received. While holding her stomach and mouth, she clenched her teeth. She's feeling nauseous. However, if she vomited now, the vomit would be stuck in her mouth and nose and she could choke to death, so she has no choice but to suppress the urge. Kaisai wondered if he should take this chance to run, but he can't afford to abandon Dia-Rose after she protected him. After all, with her earlier provocation, it wouldn't be strange if Valentina decided to kill her if he left her alone. While he was pondering his options, Valentina let go of her mouth and exhaled slowly. Apparently, her nausea had subsided, and with a forced smile on her pale face, she turned to Kaisai. That's how it is, you can't escape me now. Kaisai stiffened at those words. CH 299. The hero always come late. I've already come this far. Don't think that you can run away from me now. Valentina stares at Kaisai with madness in her eyes. After being repeatedly verbally abused so many times, she must have a lot on her mind right now. We can talk this out. Physically, he has no chance of winning. Even if he tries to run, his opponent is literally a beast in human form. There's no doubt that he will be caught in 30 seconds at best. If so, then there's no other way out for him but to try and persuade her. Sorry, my love. Even if it's you, I don't think that you can get through to the current me. I thought as much. Kaisai cried out, his face twitching. She just got completely wrecked by Dia-Rose's verbal abuse. She probably doesn't want to hear anything but comforting words at the moment. I'm very frustrated right now. Hey, my love, please don't resist. This is for your sake as well. With her face pale, Valentina slowly crept up toward Kaisai. Like a beast cornering its prey, inside his head, feelings of helplessness began to overwhelm him. Little by little, the distance between them narrowed. Kaisai has no way to escape. After all, he knows that no matter what he tries, Valentina will immediately pounce at him. Good boy. Hi. At the moment Valentina's hand touched his shoulder. Sayek. With a loud cry, someone swooped down from the ceiling. It's Schlier. She activated the thruster on her jetpack and performed a flying kick on Valentina. She was completely taken by surprise. Valentina couldn't avoid it because she was caught off guard and got blown away. Seeing Valentina crash into the wall, Schlier did not get careless and landed herself in front of Kaisai. Kaisai, are you okay? I'm sorry I'm late, Schlier asked in a sharp voice without taking her eyes off Valentina. Kaisai held his breath and gave her a reply. I'm fine, but Dia-Rose is. You can just spit on that kind of injury. Don't worry about her. Although Dia-Rose is lying down unconscious while bleeding from her nose, Schlier's words were harsh. However, although Kaisai couldn't see it, a sign of respect can be seen on her face. That said, since she put Dia-Rose through that kind of pain, it seems I will have to exercise an appropriate punishment on that woman. Saying so, Schlier pulls out an old-fashioned revolver from her holster. She pressed her thumb on the hammer and gently pointed it at Valentina. While watching Schlier, Valentina stumbled to her feet. As expected, she's already nearing her limits. Her legs were wobbling. If gravity still worked here, she might not have been able to stand. Damn it. She reflexively put her hand on her holster, but of course, there was nothing in it. With a hateful look, She glared at Schleer. "You got this far with the jetpack alone?" A jetpack can be packed inside a rucksack, so it's standard equipment inside a striker cockpit. However, since it only has a small capacity for propellant, it's only reserved for emergency uses. This wrecked battleship is quite far away from the place where their strikers were damaged. Normally, the propellant would have run out long before she got here. I asked Miss Tiltwine to serve me one last time. Even if she's a wreck now, she can still at least fire her thruster in one direction after all. Damn it. I should have killed you. Valentina spat that out with a terribly frustrated expression. You thieving dog. You're playing a hero now? My, I see, so the fun was already spoiled, huh? Schleer shrugged without showing a shred of remorse. It's your fault for taking your time. We didn't have a ladies' pact binding us to anything, so I'd appreciate it if you don't blame me for your own shortcomings. Why, you. Valentina tries to curse at her, but she knows that it's her fault, so she shut her mouth and didn't say anything more. Now then, what do you want to do? Fight me? Or do you want to give up? Schleer asked with a serious look on her face while still pointing her gun at Valentina. She doesn't want to actually shoot, of course. After all, even with all their differences, they have fought side by side. To be honest, I couldn't care less about your ambitions. If you give me your word that you will not invade Kalanshia, then you can go take your throne or whatever you want. Schleer's words were cold. Valentina's face stiffened as she stared alternately between Schleer and Kaisai. But I do respect you as a rival. If Kaisai-san gives his consent, you are welcome to join us. Now, what do you want to do? Surprised, Valentina's eyes opened wide. Even after I came this far, I have to give it all up. Yes. Kaisai thought for a while and quietly gave a silent nod. He thought that it was the only way for this to end in an amicable way. He doesn't hate her and he doesn't want her to die. Even if she just went berserk on him, she can still turn back. If possible, Kaisai also wants to make up with Valentina. Although she's usually cold toward Dairose, she actually cares a lot for her sister. It's too sad if they cannot reconcile with a fight like this. The throne or Kaisai. Choose whichever you like. Valentina had been silent for a while, but tears slowly appeared in the corners of her eyes. It continued to pour out and she eventually started crying for real. I thought. If I become an empress. If I become someone important, nobody would make fun of me anymore. As her tears flowed, she began to monologue. She glanced at her unconscious sister, the woman who became their ally although she used to be their nemesis. In the end, Valentina decided to follow her older sister's example. She gently puts her knees on the floor and lowers her head, prostrating in front of them. I was wrong. Please forgive me. With a grin, Schleer turned to Kaisai. All right, I forgive you. With those words, the war between Nord and Kalanshia came to an end. CH 300. The final chapter, There and Back Again. With the Empress in their custody, there was no longer any resistance from the Nord forces. Similarly, since Valentina had surrendered, none of the soldiers from her faction were willing to fight the Kalanshian army. It was a complete victory for Kalanshia. The news of the Empress's defeat spread back to Nord in no time, and the imperial court turned into a quagmire of power struggle to name a new empress. Peace negotiations ran into difficulties because of that, but Nord no longer had the strength to carry out another invasion. After all, they have to reserve their forces in case of civil war and internal conflicts in the future. Taking advantage of this, Dairose participated in the peace negotiations as a representative of Kalanshia. Using her sharp mind, she crushed every diplomat Nord sent who kept stalling the process. Have you no shame? Despite being the next in line for the Nord throne, she defected to Kalanshia and is even carrying out the peace negotiation on their behalf, but she herself was as cool as cucumber. The war finally ended. She just wanted to be released from all these works and spend her days with the man she loved. Due to her effort on the desk work, Kalanshia managed to win a large amount of war reparation with a non-aggression pact in place for the next 50 years plus some territory belonging to Nord. The people were already tired of war, so they welcomed this result. The Kalanshian capital was wrapped in a celebratory mood with victory parades and parties held days and nights. Moreover, With Kaisai's name being heralded as the savior of Kalanshia, he's receiving hero treatment from the entire nation. Let me off already. Kaisai, who was forced to participate in these parties for 2 weeks straight, said that and fell asleep. In his own words, this was the toughest battle he had ever experienced. In the end, it wasn't until a month after the end of the war that he was finally freed. With a long sigh, Kaisai stretched. There were thin dark circles under his eyes. He was walking down a street in the downtown area while dragging a case behind him. He came to a sudden halt and squatted down in front of a roadside shop. While looking at the handmade accessories lined up on the mat, he let out a small groan. "What's wrong? Do you want it?" asked Dia-Rose, who was walking behind him. She's wearing an old-fashioned military coat with an oversized travel bag in her hand. Anyone could tell that she was traveling somewhere at a glance. "I'm wondering which one I should get." "Dear customer, I think any of these would look good on you," the girl who seems to be the shop owner said while rubbing her hands. The look in her eyes constrained more flattery than what she directed to her other customers. "Are you his girlfriend?" "At a time like this, I believe it would be your turn to buy everything for him, you know." With a complete change of attitude, she stared at Dia-Rose with provocative eyes. In return, Dia-Rose folds her arms and lets out a deep sigh. "I'm just a leech, you see. Unfortunately, I'm completely broke." The girl's expression immediately changed. It was as though she was looking at a piece of trash. Seeing that, Dia-Rose grins and continues. "It's great to have such a nice man take care of my meals and even at night, you know." "What's wrong?" "Jealous." Kaisai silently jabbed Dia-Rose at her knee. Perhaps because of the time they have spent together, his attitude toward her has turned terribly rude. However, Dia-Rose simply has a blissful look on her face as she lets out a small moan. "It's not for me. I'm buying it as a souvenir for my sister. It's been a while since I last went home, you see." "Oh my shop only sells accessories aimed at men though," the girl replied in surprise while completely ignoring Dia-Rose. "Well, it's okay. She will probably like this kind of thing after all, although it's his sister. He hasn't seen her in over a few years." Kaisai's voice was filled with uncertainties and the girl wondered what she should say. It was at that moment, a large woman suddenly ran up and grabbed Kaisai. She holds him under her arm and starts running at full speed. Oi! Dia-Rose rushed after her, but a random thug appeared out of nowhere and tackled her. She was hit from the side and was blown away quite a distance. Hearing Dia-Rose's scream, Kaisai tried to resist with all his might, but there was no way he could win against Evold's physical strength. In the end, he was carried away. That should do it. 10 minutes later, the kidnapper muttered so and rolled Kaisai to the ground. He started to groan and looked around. He's currently inside a deserted back alley. He tries to run, but the kidnapper grabs him by the collar and forces him to the ground. With just that, Kaisai became unable to move. "Who are you?" The kidnapper didn't answer. Instead, she brings her face close to his. "Quite a find, huh? You will fetch a good price." Apparently, he was kidnapped for a commercial purpose. Even though the war is already over, it would be a stretch to say that Kalanshia's public security has been restored. Finding this kind of criminal lurking around is not rare at all. "Wait a minute. You said that would fetch a high price, but there's no harm done if we have a taste first, right?" The person who said that seems to be the minion of his kidnapper. Her words seemed to be the consensus of her subordinates, and the other 3 thugs in the alley all nodded along. "Of course. But I'm first." "You got that right." "As expected of you, sis. You do understand us." It was the moment the other thugs cheered, and a burst of gunshots rang out in the alley. One of the thugs who was shot in the shoulder rolls on the ground while holding her wound. The kidnapper immediately turned toward the gunshot and found Schleer aiming her pistol at her. With smoke still spewing out from the muzzle, Schleer yells, "Take them down." Along with that commander, a large number of women rushed at the kidnappers. A samurai with a katana, a knight with a red ponytail, a girl with pistols in both hands, and even an aristocrat-looking woman holding a machine gun. It was quite a terrifying sight. You can hurt them, but be careful to leave them alive. We can't be showing some unsightly corpses in front of him after all." Seeing them being subdued in no time, Schleer declared so. After all, the kidnappers were overwhelmed in terms of both quantity and quality. "Are you all right?" my love?" Valentina asked while extending her hand out to him. "Yeah." For some reason Kaisai answered and took her hand to stand up. He then patted his flight jacket and jeans to get rid of the dust and glanced at Valentina's neck. "You're still not convinced about this?" Around her neck was a collar of the same design as Dairo's. "Naturally, the functionality of this collar is the exact same. With one press of a switch, Kais could blow off her head." "Yeah. I mean, is there a need for you to wear such a dangerous thing?" "It's just my way to take responsibility." Valentina said so as though she doesn't mind it at all. In the end, she did not return to Nord and became a general for Kalanshia. The collar was attached to her neck at her own request. She said that since she'd betrayed Kaisai and Schlier, this is her way to show that it won't happen again. "Besides, it's a match with my sister." "Well, it's not that bad." The expression on Valentina's face was terribly bright and refreshing. It's as though a weight has been lifted off her shoulders. Sorry. I was calling for reinforcements but it was too late." Dairos appears while scratching the back of her head. "It was Dairos who said that you would take responsibility and protect him." "Is this what you have to show for that?" It was Lyran who's carrying a large sniper rifle who criticized Dairos so. Her already sharp eyes coupled with the harshness were directed at this former crown princess turned slave. "That's right. Even though it's our long-awaited honeymoon, you suddenly tried hogging him to yourself." "Well, ha. Since Schlier is also blaming her for this, Dairos has no choice but to laugh it off." "We will take care of you later, Desu. Please leave this to me." While pointing her gun at the kidnappers, Nora, whose limbs are sticking out from her robe, said so with a grin. "If there's going to be punishment then I would prefer Mars to do it though." "Isn't that just going to turn into a reward then?" said Tursis with a sigh. "If it's a reward then we would rather receive it ourselves." "Why do we have to yield it to you when we were the ones who saved the day?" Eleanor snorted and pushed out her plump chest. "Don't talk nonsense. You just had your turn last night, right? Get in line. It's my turn tonight." Saki complains while making a sour expression. "You all don't seem to want to hold back even though we're about to go on a long trip, huh?" "I understand the need to have fun but you have to be mindful of Kaisai's health, okay?" The one who keeps Saki in check is Frey. The back alley was filled with Kaisai's fiancés. The sheer number already gave him a headache and he has to hold his head. "Seriously, those women. Kaisai-san, did they hurt you?" "No, rather. Do you think I will survive this trip back home?" I will beat those nymphos up if it comes down to that, so please don't worry." Kaisai stared at Schlier as though he wanted to say you're one of those nymphos too though. He doesn't know whether it was because they became relaxed with the conclusion of the war or the fact that they just publicly announced the engagement. These girls do not hesitate in showing off their animalistic lust. One of them would sneak into his room each night so honestly, he's exhausted. "Anyway, we are going to give our greeting to our sister-in-law. Make sure to look proper in front of her, alright?" Schlier warned while narrowing her eyes. Kaisai let out a small sigh. Since the post-war mess has been sorted out, Kaisai decided to return home for once. The purpose of this trip is to introduce them to his family and invite them to the wedding. He had already informed his family about his current situation to some extent in the mail, but he couldn't bring himself to write that he was marrying multiple women at the same time. Even now, he still wonders how to explain it when he gets home. After all, just thinking about that already gave him a headache. "Alright, let's hand these idiots over to the police." The ship is already prepared, so let's head straight to the spaceport after this. He doesn't know if Schlier understands his worry or not, but she's urging them to move in a good mood. With a sigh, he gives her a small smile. "Seriously, I might be able to find a better death if I continued to be a merc, huh?" Contrary to his words, the look on his face was somewhat happy. TLN. Phew, it's over. The author said that there will be some afterstory, but I will have to look for them first.